And we begin this Global News election special with a live look at City Hall. With polls now closed, the focus turns to results. We're expecting the numbers to start coming in very soon.
With Mayor Naheed Nenshi, as well as a number of councillors not running again in their wards, the makeup in City Council chambers is guaranteed to be significantly different.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for our special coverage, Decision Calgary.
Across the city, Calgarians have been having their say. As of 6 o'clock tonight, the voter turnout sitting at 129,500. And while the polls are now closed, anyone in line before 8 o'clock will have a chance to cast their ballot tonight.
Global's Tracy Nagai is at a polling station tonight, and polls, as we said, are now closed, and there are still some that are quite busy tonight. What's it like where you are, Tracy?
Oh my gosh, there is quite the line here. I'm out in Varsity right now, and I'll just get you a look here of the line of people that are still waiting in order to cast the ballot. This has actually been a very busy place this evening. We've been seeing wait times between 45 minutes and an hour, and of course this municipal election very different from others, you know, with the health restrictions in place, people socially distancing. There's also a plebiscite and 2 referendum questions that people are being asked to vote on. Now, earlier, some voters thought that these long wait times might be due to the fact that there's only one tabulator to process the votes. This is the same that we're seeing in polling stations across the city. Others think that it may be due to an increase of people turning out to vote. Either way, a lot of people surprised by just how long the lineup is. What did you think of the process? Did you think it was going to be this long?
No, no. I drove by earlier at like 3:30 and the lineup was shorter than it was by the time I came back again to try. So.
But you're going to wait it out?
I reckon I will.
And why do you think it's so important?
It's a civic duty. We need to get our voices heard. And the only way we can do it is by voting.
Now, we are expecting to see another update from Elections Calgary any minute now about the voter turnout. As Joel had said, there was 129,000 people that already cast their vote as of 6 p.m. and we are waiting to see those numbers hopefully roll in shortly from some stations throughout the city. Joel, Linda?
All right, Tracy Nagai reporting live for us tonight. Thank you. Keep an eye on that for us if you can. Well, for the first time in a municipal election, the city will be using electronic tabulators to tally the votes. The machines read the ballots in just seconds, with results updated every 5 minutes. And we have a team of political experts here ready to analyze and react to all of those results as they come in throughout the night.
And among them, Dwayne Bratt from Mount Royal University. Dwayne will be joining Joel and I throughout the evening.
And Global's Dallas Flexog is here in the studio, heading up our expert panel, Dallas.
Yes, this is your panel for this evening. The host of The Drive on 770 CHQR, Ted Henley, community advocate and policy expert Jason Ribeiro, and University of Calgary professor Lisa Young. We will be here all night for you, providing analysis of what we are seeing tonight and the issues facing Calgarians now. Joel, Linda?
Thanks, Dallas. And let's get right to it. And the race to be Calgary's next mayor, 27 people are running for council's top job. Lots of choice for sure. But if recent polls are correct, it has become a bit of a 2-horse race between former city councillors Jeremy Farkas and Jyoti Gondek. Both campaigns are hoping a final push this past weekend will lead them to victory.
And tonight, Global's Adam McVicker is at Jyoti Gondek's headquarters on McLeod Trail. Jamie Dahl is at Gasoline Alley in Heritage Park, where members of Jeremy Farkas' campaign will be watching the results come in. Adam, let's begin with you tonight. What's the mood down there early?
Well, things are starting to pick up here, Joel. We're at the Jyoti Gondek campaign headquarters, where it's kind of been transformed into a bit of an election night party, but a small one. Only some key supporters here this evening as they are trying to obey all COVID-19 protocols with proof of vaccination at the door and, of course, masking inside as well. So a bit of a subdued event here on election night. Not something we usually see on an election night. Of course, a massive election of this scale, electing a new mayor here in our city. But they are are feeling pretty good here at campaign headquarters. They said they are feeling that momentum, and that momentum is something that's been picking up since about mid-August. Public opinion polls began to really show that climb starting in August when Councillor Gondek began to come out and rally against the province's COVID-19 response, and has since climbed, showing a statistical neck-and-neck race between her and Jeremy Farkas. So they're hoping they can capitalize on that this evening. And speaking today, they were urging people to get out to the polls. Of course, that support for Jyoti Gondek's campaign is, according to the polls, below the age of 45 years old. So they were hoping some of those younger voters who do support Jyoti Gondek would come out and support her at the polls, at the ballot box, as Farkas's supporters a little older and are more guaranteed that they would show up to vote. Now, the campaign platform uses a theme of a resilient city. They're outlining some key issues like economic recovery, downtown revitalization, tax reform, housing, construction of the Green Line to the north, which is where Jyoti Gondek represented that area when she was elected City Council in 2017, as there's also some investments for the arts in that platform. Now, they said they ramped up their campaigning over the weekend to try to really get people to go to the polls, similar to what they were doing before, but just in a more ramped up style, all the way down to the last minute here. And what they're hoping is that momentum turns into history. Of course, if Jyoti Gondek is elected tonight, she would be the first woman ever elected mayor in our city's history. So we are waiting now for results to come in. You can start to feel the energy as more of those campaign staffers have arrived here at the headquarters. So we will continue to bring you updates here throughout the evening, as well as online at globalnews.ca. Back to you guys.
All right, Adam McVicker reporting live for us tonight at Jyoti Gondek's headquarters.
And Jamie Dahl is with the Jeremy Farkas campaign at Gasoline Alley at Heritage Park. And how are they feeling tonight after the end of this campaign, Jamie?
Well, Linda, we are parked here at Gasoline Alley amongst all these beautiful old cars, but everyone hoping tonight will be the night Jeremy Farkas wins his ride and is ultimately a seat in the mayor's office come the end of what is coming out to be a very long campaign for the Farkas team. I'm joined by Jeremy Farkas's family here. This is Peter Farkas, his dad. Peter, you've been with your son right from the get-go. What has it been like campaigning side by side with your son?
It was quite an experience, a very enjoyable experience. People had a lot of support for Jeremy and his family behind me. All support him. His biggest supporters are in this.
They've got us on in the background here. We're just going to try to cut the audio of us in the background here, guys. Sorry. Thanks, Peter. What has been? Did you ever imagine your son would be in this position, running for mayor?
I have never thought he would run for mayor. I just thought he was into politics as a councilman. He did a great job, and the decision was his, and he wants to be mayor.
What's it like even just seeing his name on this sign and handing out the literature? And you said that you were honking horns a lot.
It's a very unbelievable experience. It's very joyful where he has achieved what he has achieved in his life.
Are you his biggest fan?
I think everybody in this room is his biggest fan.
Win or lose?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. We'll send it back to you guys.
All right, thanks, Jamie.
Well, as we showed you earlier, we have a number of experts standing by to offer their analysis of what we see tonight. Political scientist Dwayne Bratt from Mount Royal University, joining us. First, we want to just throw up some of the graphics we're going to see tonight when it comes to when the results start to roll in. So obviously, right now, no polls are reporting. This is how election night works. 8 o'clock is when the polls closed. But one of the big things is with people still in line, right? Everyone gets a chance to vote if you were in line by 8 o'clock. So we may be waiting for a bit as we see these are your candidates here in Calgary for mayor. Jeremy Farkas, the campaign we were just there at Bratt Field. Another candidate, Jyoti Gondek, where Adam McVicker is tonight. Just a couple of the 27 candidates that are running in the race to be Calgary's next mayor.
Yeah, a really large slate this time around. And we want to bring in Dwayne Bratt now to have a little conversation about this because, you know, we talk about new faces and new ideas and all those kind of things. But this was really a diverse group of people running. Some familiar names and faces from City Council, but also some real great contenders, you know, across the board, from business people to community activists, really wanting to have a say and put their name in the hat to be the mayor. What do you think? And what are you going to watch for tonight, Dwayne?
Well, so far it's a 27-way tie for first place. But it is remarkable that there's so many people running. And a lot of these people know that they're not going to win, but it's an opportunity for them to play a role in the political process and get some of their ideas and views out there. And I commend almost all of the 27 candidates. There's a few that I wish were not running for obvious reasons. But the real front runners have been the 3 sitting councillors. And it's because this has been the most unusual race that we've ever seen. It's an open seat for mayor, but we had a federal election just a month ago. So it was like there was 2 parts to the campaign. There was the campaign in the spring and summer, then they took a long halftime, then they came back after and ran a month-long campaign, but was really only kicked into high gear over the last couple weeks of October. Then you've got the COVID situation and issues with the provincial government. So this is an election the likes of which we've never seen, which has meant that if you weren't on City Council, it was tough for you to penetrate the top tier of candidates.
Right, and let's talk about some of those other voices, Dwayne, because I mean, these are people who are well known in the community as well. Did they help change the narrative or adjust the platforms at all in this race?
I think they did, but unfortunately for them, it was on the margins. They never had an opportunity of coming forward. Both Brad Field, who's a businessman, and Jan Demery, who used to fundraise for the YWCA, were participating on some of the panels, on some of the forums, but it was tough for them. And a guy like Jeff Davison, who had been on City Council, just like Gondek and Farkas, but was a behind-the-scenes guy. You know, he was involved in the intricacies of the arena deal, and as a result, he was the least known citywide of the 3 councillors running, and I think that hurt his campaign. And he only seemed to get his legs under him the last week or so, and it was just a bit too little too late for him.
Obviously, we've been looking at recent polling as we've led up to tonight, and that polling showing a race, according to the polls, between Jyoti Gondek and Jeremy Farkas, 2 of the councillors you've mentioned. Obviously, look, things could change by the time we're done tonight, but if we're talking about these 2 candidates, Dwayne, what have you seen in the last, I don't know, days, weeks, that you think might make the difference tonight in this race from either of these 2 candidates?
So we start with Jeremy Farkas. He got out front early. He announced that he was running for mayor a year ago, but quite frankly, almost since the moment he was elected as a city councillor in 2017, he was gunning for the mayor's job. He was the guy to get rid of the city establishment. He was the no vote on city council. You know, so he opposed the arena, and he opposed the Green Line, and he opposed the mayor. And as a result, there was a hardcore set of supporters that he had that stayed with him. The problem is, as we got into the fall, he had to build that. And then you have someone like Jyoti Gondek, who would be the first female mayor of Calgary if she was elected. And she has sometimes tracked to the left on progressive issues, but also at other times she's been more centrist or more conservative on others. Where she really found her footing was on the issue of vaccines, on the issue of mask mandates, on the issue of COVID. And there was a direct contrast with Jeremy Farkas. And there was a major vote about a month ago where Gondek and every other councillor voted in favor of a vaccine mandate in the city, and Jeremy Farkas voted against it. And I think that vote has hurt him. The other thing that I think has hurt Farkas was a public letter that he put out calling for supporters of Jeff Davison and Brad Field to abandon their candidates and come to his side. That showed that he realized he was trailing Jyoti Gondek and needed to do something to change the narrative. So I'm going to be looking tonight to see what does the vote total of Jeff Davison look like? What does the vote total of Brad Field look like? Was this Hail Mary by Farkas successful or not?
All right, and again, we're talking about those folks who are, according to the polling, were considered to be the top three contenders here nearing the end of the race. But of course, we all know politics and voting, anything can happen. So we'll keep an eye on the numbers as they come in tonight. Right now, let's go over to our Dallas Flex Hog and her panel of experts tonight for some insight on what we might expect to see.
Lots of great insight already from Dwayne, Bratt there. Let's bring in our panelists now, Jason, Lisa, and Ted. I want to talk about this. What was this election about? Was there one thing that Calgarians are hanging their hat on? Ted, what do you think?
Oh, wow. One thing to hang their hat on, that's really hard to say, Dallas. It certainly was the pitting of Jyoti Gondek and Jeremy Farkas against each other. And I would argue that Jyoti Gondek has been a way more collaborative city council member than Jeremy Farkas has. So maybe that's what it was. I guess collaborative versus quote unquote lone wolf, as people have described Jeremy Farkas. But other people who have called into my radio show have talked about the fact that they like Jeremy Farkas pushing back against, you know, the quote unquote elite council members and that type of thing, and pushing back against what is expected of councillors to do. But to narrow it down to one thing, Dallas, yeah, that's tough. That's tough.
It is tough, and I agree with that. Jason, what do you think? What is this election about?
This was an election about a completely different order of government than the municipal government. This was the election of Jason Kenney. And I think how, you know, up and down the ballot, from mayor to council members, even down to trustees, I think everyone did their calibration based on this rearing force in 2019, which was the UCP, and how much they've lost Calgarians' trust over the last few years. And so that narrative, I think, has persisted not only at the mayor's level quite viscerally, as Dwayne mentioned, but up and down the ballot. And I can only imagine that when people are at the doors asking for people's trust, that COVID-19 and the province's response has to come up in those conversations. And I think that council has a huge task ahead of it in terms of rebuilding trust. But we are, you know, in the midst of living out an experiment in trust at the provincial level. And I think what we're hearing at the doors is that trust has been broken. I think a lot of folks will be looking for that trust in who they elect to their new city council and mayor's chair tonight.
Jason, further expand on that trust issue. You're seeing actual evidence of that in some numbers and some polls.
Absolutely. The last City of Calgary spring pulse survey that was done earlier this year showed a staggering number that I just haven't been able to shake, which is that 50% of Calgarians do not trust the city. And by the city, they mean city council and city administration. That's staggering to me. You know, part of it can be chalked up to, you know, global forces of populism and misinformation and polarization and just, you know, overall awfulness taking hold of our political sphere. But a lot of it can come down to dysfunction that I think we've all seen in terms of how city council has conducted itself. And I'll very quickly, you know, disagree with a little bit of what Dwayne said. I don't think the mayoral race or even the council race saw the talent that we would think would run in an election, in a change election where we're seeing this much turnover. We aren't seeing bigger names, bigger credible people that have the raw political talent to carry the day. So yes, you know, there are the also-rans that have run, but I don't think that any of them had the raw political talent we would expect in such a change election. So the new council and the new mayor have their work cut out for them in terms of rebuilding trust with the citizens of this city. Some
interesting insight there for sure. Lisa, I'll pose you the same question. What do you think this election is about?
Well, I do agree with Jason that there's really a lot here that is about COVID, and it's about the provincial government. I mean, we can see this in some ways as being a referendum about Jason Kenney. But I also think that there is a dimension of this that is about Calgary. And it's really, I think we can think of it as a tension in some ways between a traditional notion of Calgary, you know, as being small c or capital C conservative, being in favor of low taxes, limited government on the one hand, and then a rather different vision of Calgary, and you know, one that emphasizes the diversity of the city, one that emphasizes, you know, some more progressive ideas about urbanism, and I think there's a really stark choice here for Calgarians between those two sort of visions and potential futures of the city.
If Jeremy Farkas is elected, he would be the Conservative candidate. It would be the first time, really, that Calgary elects a Conservative mayor. What does that signal from voters then, Ted, if that does end up being the case tonight?
Oh, wow. I think that would signal that there's going to be a lot more of a connection between decisions at the council level here in the city with the kind of values aligned with the Conservative Party here in Alberta, the UCP. It would be tough, I think, just knowing the people that I know in this city from all different walks of life. You know what I mean? I can't see it just being so small c conservative. Yes, there are many, many, many small c conservatives in this city, but there are a lot of small c conservative people that I know that are also quite progressive and that are also quite willing to support some things that are not your typical small c conservative things to support. So it'll be really interesting to see, you know, who does win the mayor's chair, whose vision for the future of Calgary the people in this city decide to vote for, because it is quite important, right? Having that vision when you're the person at the top. Yes, it's one vote out of 15 on city council, but when you're the mayor, you're the face, of course, for the city, and you're the person that's visiting all the other cities across this country and talking with the prime minister when, you know, the prime minister comes into town and that type of thing. So it'll be quite interesting to see the choice that's made tonight, that's for sure.
Jason, how closely is the UCP government watching not only this race here in Calgary, but up in Edmonton as well?
Well, I think they're watching it for a number of reasons, not just the electoral outcome municipally, but also, you know, who's going to the polls and why as it relates to the provincial referendum questions on equalization and daylight savings. But look, you know, I'll take issue with a little bit of the characterization. We haven't really elected a small c conservative mayor in decades, far you know, back than I can remember. You know, every single one of them, even to Ralph Klein, has had a sort of liberal bent or a liberal, you know, capital L liberal connection. So this is an interesting race because it is reading a little bit of the tea leaves at the provincial level. But look, you know, municipalities and cities are very, very different. So as much as we're trying to thread the needle here, you know, cities across this country have not really had an ardent, hardline, small c conservative mayor, nor one that's a council. And so this will put Calgary, if that's true up and down the ballot, it is conservative. This will put us in a very precarious position because cities are in their nature evolving, learning, moving forward. This kind of traditional go back to the way it was doesn't necessarily square with the progress and transformation that I think Calgary is known for. So definitely something to watch in terms of mood telling for the provincial counterparts, but for the city and its place in this country as well.
Well, if we could only have reading those tea leaves right now, then we would learn a lot more. But we're going to find out more as the night progresses, as those votes do start coming in. One note, Joel and Linda, it's 1-1 for the Flames and the Ducks.
That's a score we could probably all agree on, right? Hey, thanks, Dallas and panel. Look, obviously our focus tonight on Calgary and the surrounding area, but across our province there will be change in other parts, other cities, including Edmonton, where Mayor Don Iveson is no longer going to be mayor after tonight, not seeking re-election in that city. A couple of candidates there that we will have our eyes on and we'll update you throughout the evening. Some other regions as well. Red Deer, I believe, and Lethbridge. We'll see those in a second as the last candidates for the mayoral race in Edmonton play out on your screen. We move over to the city of Lethbridge, where, again, Mayor Chris Spearman will not be seeking re-election tonight. That means that the city of Lethbridge will also have a new mayor once the night is over. And the same will go as well for the city of Red Deer. City of Red Deer's Mayor Tara Veer not running for re-election. And so, just like Calgary, just like Lethbridge, just like Edmonton, Red Deer as well will have some change. It really is not just here in Calgary, but it is a night of change across the province, Linda.
Yeah, that is the buzzword for this election. That is for sure. Generational change. Especially here in the city of Calgary, we've heard a lot of that. So there's other areas, communities that we're keeping an eye on. Our Lauren Pullen gets the touchscreen tonight to take us a little bit closer to some of the communities just outside of Calgary.
Good evening, Joel and Linda. Yes, we're going to be using our touchscreen technology this evening to be focusing in on some of the major mayoral races that are happening surrounding the Calgary area. So we have Calgary right smack dab in the middle there for you, and we're going to be focusing all the way north up to Olds, west to Banff, south to High River, east to Strathmore, and again, 9 cities and communities that we will be focusing on and tracking those election results as they come in. And the polls haven't been closed for all that long, but we do actually already have some results coming from the Airdrie area. It does look like incumbent Peter Brown, who is seeking his 4th term as mayor, does have a fairly hefty lead so far with 3 of 8 polls reported. Lindsay Coyle, a local entrepreneur, really wanting to bring a citizen voice to the table. She has about 20% of that vote right now. And Alan Hunter is also a familiar face to lots of people in Airdrie. He was a former councillor between 2010 and 2017, right now at 10.6% of the vote. Again, we only have 3 of those 8 polls reporting, but so far a commanding lead for incumbent Peter Brown. So we will be continuing to track all of these storylines as they unfold throughout the evening for you. And there will be several interesting ones, Joel and Linda, because we do know in at least 3 towns around the Calgary area there will be brand new faces in the mayor chair because incumbents decided not to run again.
All right, Lauren Pullen, keeping track of everything around Calgary on the big board. Thank you so much. Let's bring Dwayne Bratt back in, political scientist. Dwayne, I know obviously your focus here being Calgary based is on Calgary, but one issue that we can go back a couple of minutes ago, we talked about the city of Edmonton. They will have a new mayor as well. I imagine that the relationship between the 2 cities will be, or could be, different depending on who gets in office in the 2 cities.
Oh, very much so. It's been a very rocky last 2 years with the UCP government and Iveson and Nenshi as the big city mayors. And in fact, in their sort of farewell tour, both Nenshi and Iveson have taken some real shots at the relationship with the provincial government. So much is going to depend on who gets elected. If it's Gondek and Amarjit Sohi in Edmonton, I think that bad relationship with the province is going to continue. But if it's Mike Nickel or if it's Jeremy Farkas, then I think you could have an improved relationship with the provincial government.
Dwayne, talk about the representation from women in this election. There's been more of a movement, the Ask Her movement, to try and get more women to run for office at the municipal level. We did see more women run this time around, but also some challenges for them.
Yeah, I mean, they often have issues in municipal politics because of things like money and name recognition, as well as we know female politicians take a lot more abuse on the campaign trail than male politicians do. Given the experience level, the fact that in 2017 there were only 3 women on city council, which was one of the lowest numbers in decades, Drew Farrell, Jyoti Gondek, and Diane Carly Urquhart, it meant that it was difficult for them to run, for women to run as incumbents. We are seeing some very strong women, Jasmine Mean in one of the ridings, Jennifer Wyness in Ward 2. So there could be a greater gender balance on this council. And if Jyoti Gondek is elected, she'll become the first female mayor of Calgary.
You mentioned some of the names running for council, Dwayne. Any races that you're particularly watching when it comes to the wards?
There's just so much of them because there's 9 of them where there are no incumbents running. But the races that I'm interested in is Ward 2 and Ward 4, where there are incumbents, but incumbents with baggage. In Ward 2, you have Joe Maglioka seeking a 3rd term as councillor there. He was involved in a major expense scandal that led a scathing report out of the city of Calgary and Maglioka voluntarily paying back thousands of dollars. And then 2 weeks ago, the RCMP laid criminal charges for breach of trust and fraud against Maglioka. So normally incumbents win. We'll have to see if these sorts of charges and scandals will affect Maglioka. And similar with Sean Chu, another strong conservative on council, like Maglioka, that over the last several days there's been serious allegations about some of his behavior as a Calgary police officer. In fact, he was convicted of discreditable conduct. Those stories are continuing to break, but because it came about so late after the advanced polls, and one story late today after many people voted, we'll have to see the impact that has. But I think that's a story that's going to continue after tonight, whether he wins or loses. And from a personal perspective, I'm very interested in Ward 8 because I live in Ward 8. It's an open riding. Evan Woolley has decided not to run again, and we're seeing a tough battle between Gary Bobrovitz and Courtney Walcott. And I think both would make fine councillors. I'd be happy with either of them, but let's see how that one plays itself out tonight.
Yeah, and on that Sean Chu story, the Calgary Police actually releasing a statement today saying that one allegation of misconduct was sustained through their internal disciplinary process. As you said, Dwayne, likely more that we will hear about that story in the days ahead. Stand by. We want to, of course, continue that conversation with you, Dwayne, but bring in our other panelists as well. Let's go over to Dallas.
Maybe just on the back of that, we'll bring in our panel now and ask about those ward races, those councillor races as well, because yes, 9 of 14 wards have no incumbent running. Jason, what are you watching for tonight? Do you agree with what Dwayne was saying?
Yes, I am watching the ward races because I think they're very consequential, and I also live in Ward 8, so I look forward to seeing Dwayne around the local area here. But look, there are also some previous councillors that are running again. You have Richard Putmans in Ward 6. You have Andre Chabot, former councillor and mayoral candidate in 2017, running in Ward 10. So there's a mix of old faces amongst a sea of new. I'm paying attention particularly as well to the ones where the incumbent is coming in with some baggage in terms of their personal conduct, both as a councillor and prior to a councillor. But look, I'm also very, very interested in the incumbents that are currently serving, whether the conventional wisdom actually holds through. Do they, get reelected at an 80 to 90% clip like the rest of the country, or are some of them in trouble? And it's really a crapshoot because we haven't had any ward level polling, any credible ones at least, to be able to guide us. So we'll be finding this out in real time with viewers at home, and that actually makes this election very, very exciting.
Yeah, we're excited about it, and those polls are closed now. We'll wait for those results to come in, but Calgarians, of course, have a big part in this. They are the ones deciding who is going to make up the mayor and council. In 2013, only 36% of eligible voters cast a ballot. In 2017, that was 58.1%, which was the highest number we've seen in 40 years. We, of course, saw record advance voting in this election in 2021, which was more than 2013 and 2017 advanced voting polls combined. What role do Calgarians have in this? What are we going to see? And will Calgarians be turning out to vote, Lisa, tonight?
Well, I think we've seen that there are still some lineups, so I don't think that we're looking at voter turnout that's in the 30s. The numbers we've seen so far, tracking through the day, suggest that we're going to end up maybe a little bit lower than in 2017, but in a similar sort of range. So more than half of eligible voters showing up to vote. And that's not really surprising in a lot of ways. If we think about, what's going on in this race, so many open races for councillor, but that open race for mayor is one of those things that I think does draw attention, as well as the referendum questions, which I think has, again, focused some people's attentions on the election today.
Ted, do you think there has been any election fatigue? Have Calgarians had enough time since the federal election to have their say, to cast their ballot tonight? What are you expecting on total voter turnout numbers tonight?
I'm hoping it's high. I'm hoping it really is, especially considering we're going to be electing a brand new mayor in the city of Calgary. But you never know. I think voter fatigue is a definite thing. I think COVID fatigue is another factor in this election because, well, we just all know that what's been happening over the last year and a half and that type of thing. I'm hoping that voter fatigue, though, does not quite play out, especially considering we have the fluoridation question that's also on the ballot this year or this time around, and the two referendum questions and the votes for senators. I'm hoping that will attract maybe some people who are not quite considering to vote to make sure that they do go out and cast their ballot. The age demographics are really interesting when you look at what the voter turnout actually turns out to be, right? It's always interesting. We know, I mean, older age groups tend to always vote and that type of thing, but it's the younger crowd. I have two kids in their 20s, and we talked about this on one of the panels leading up to the election night tonight, that sometimes it's a little hard to give them a little nudge to do that. So I'm really curious to see the age breakdown, the demographics we're going to see once we do get the final vote turnout.
Yes, hopefully we'll see those in the days to come. Linda and Joel, we'll throw it back to you. Much more with this panel still ahead.
Okay, just going to take a quick look at some numbers. We're starting to get some results in. It's still obviously early, but we have a couple of boards we want to show. In the race for mayor, still 28% with Jyoti, 45%, Jyoti Gondek to 29% for Jeremy Farkas with just 28% of the polls reporting. Jeff Davison at 14% and Bradfield at 5%. So the numbers are starting to come in, and we're going to continue to follow those for you coming up shortly.
Well, good evening. It's been a busy day at polls across the city as Calgarians have their say in the 2021 municipal election. The polls have been closed for about half an hour right now.
And we're going to go to our Tracy Nagai, who has been at a polling station for the better part of the day. And the one that you've been at, Tracy, has been very busy with lineups right down the street and around the corner where you're at. How has it looked tonight as the polls are closed?
Yeah, the polls may have closed about a half hour ago, but we are still just seeing people leaving from casting their vote. At 8 o'clock, we still saw a lineup down the block. That has cleared up, though, and the last people have gone in order to cast their ballot. Of course, with the health restrictions, everything new with this municipal election, including the plebiscite and 2 referendum questions as well. You know, we were seeing waits between 45 minutes to an hour. Earlier, some voters thought it might be because there was only one tabulator to process the votes. Others think that maybe it's because there's an increase of voter turnout. Either way, a lot of people surprised by just how many people were in line. And of course, we are going to see exactly what the numbers are going to be as they come in. Now with this voting station closing up here, we should start to see results shortly. Linda, Joel?
All right, Tracy, thank you so much. A quick look at some results that have come in for Mayor of Calgary. This is so far with 28% of the polls reporting. Jyoti Gondek leading the way at 45%, Jeremy Farkas 29%, Jeff Davison 14%, and Bradfield at 5%. Now you can join us tonight on YouTube, Amazon Prime, the Global TV app, and globalnews.ca/Calgary, or listen on 770 CHQR, and then join us on television at 11 p.m. for a recap of the night.
So we are starting to see some numbers come in, and while it is early, we see Jyoti Gondek in the lead at this point. Dallas, what do our guests have to say about that?
28% of the polls reporting so far, 45% in favor of Jyoti Gondek. Let's bring in our panel now. Lisa, let's start with you. What do you make of those early results?
Well, they're early, so we have to be careful, but 45% is certainly strong. You know, this is not what the polls were telling us, but we knew not to be too trusting of the polls because turnout really matters. But you know, we did say that Gondek had momentum going into the race, and if that's the case, then these numbers are consistent with it. So, you know, we might be headed toward a really historic evening with Calgary's first female mayor.
Yeah, historic on a number of fronts. If it goes the Jyoti Gondek way or another woman candidate, that will be the first woman mayor of Calgary. Jason, what does that signal?
Look, it's incredibly powerful. In the earlier segment, we were talking about the difficulty for women to run, for female politicians, the threats they face, but also just the mechanics of funding women and asking them to run, but also helping them actually win. We've elected more men named John than we have women on our Calgary City Council. So certainly sending a signal that the top job went to not just a woman, the most qualified person in the race, in my opinion, is a very, very strong signal that will have reverberations, I think, up and down the ballot, certainly as well with a woman of color in particular. So the numbers are early, but they're not that early. Like, this is a very, very strong lead that I'm seeing, particularly with results coming in. So let's watch them really closely.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in the hours to come, in the minutes to come, I suppose. Lisa, you've been keeping an eye on the push to get more women to run in politics.
Absolutely. And I think, there's a backstory to this election when we look at some of the candidates who are running for the council seats. And that's that organization that was mentioned earlier, Ask Her. And it's a grassroots organization that has identified underrepresentation of women in particular, but also is focused in on diversity. And so they have run what are basically called campaign schools to try to get women who are interested in politics to consider whether they're ready to run, and if they are, then to train them and give them some experience around some of the technical issues that we say are barriers to women running. So, once we start seeing some results come in for those council seats, I think we'll see whether there has been, success coming out of this. But one way or another, just the diversity of the candidates running for council, I think, we have to credit Ask Her for that in part.
Very good there. If this election does end up going to Jeremy Farkas in the polls, I guess we're reporting in, again, still pretty early. But according to the polls, this has been a two-horse race between Jeremy Farkas and Jyoti Gondek, and we'll see what happens. But history would be made, Ted, on that front too, and that Farkas has been openly an LGBTQ member of the community.
Yeah, for sure. You hit it on the head. It would be history either way if Jyoti Gondek or Jeremy Farkas does take the mayor's chair in front of Calgary's City Council. I am a little surprised at the distance between Jyoti Gondek and Jeremy Farkas just off the hop. I do know that it was about 28% of polls reporting. I was expecting it to be a little bit closer than what we saw, but who knows, with, 66 plus-ish, 2/3 of polls still left to come in for the night. But I was a little surprised by the distance. But either way, as you said, Dallas, we are going to see history tonight, based on the early numbers here, of course. We are going to see history tonight, which is a pretty cool thing for the city of Calgary.
Pretty cool for sure. On the ballot, we're seeing a lot of those extra questions as well, including fluoride back in the drinking water. Back in 2011, this was spearheaded largely by Councillor Drew Farrell, who is not running for re-election this time. That one on the ballot, do you think people have a lot of strong opinions on that one? Jason, what are you expecting to see out of this vote, which of course would be non-binding at this point?
Well, look, let's take a trip back in time. This was a plebiscite result from a previous election that Calgarians had said, we want fluoride, that had been overturned by the City Council. And so there have been advocates, public health advocates, even Alberta Health Services, who have released positions saying this was the wrong move to make. And the experiment has played out in other jurisdictions that have gone back to water fluoridation, specifically because it helps the most disadvantaged in our community. And so all of the polling that I've seen thus far in the campaign period has shown that the majority of Calgarians, just as they have in every other plebiscite done on this issue, have said this is something that we want. This is what's in our city's best interest. This is what is in our kids' best interest. And so I think there will be a lot of public pressure if the vote is in the affirmative tonight to be able to restore community water fluoridation. And that's a decision that will also have impacts to the region where we provide water as well. So something to note here.
Certainly something to keep an eye on there as well. Listen, since 2019, when Jason Kenney was first elected Premier of Alberta, we've heard the word equalization a number of times, and now it's on the ballot, the provincial ballot, this election. City of Calgary expected to release the results for just this city. Of course, this is a province-wide ballot, so we'll have to see what happens province-wide. But what do we do with that? What do we do with those results, Ted?
To be honest with you, nothing. It's a question that I just thought was I just thought it was thrown on the ballot to try and kind of rile people up and get people rah, Alberta, look, Ottawa is kind of putting us down, that type of thing. But I mean, there's constitutionally very little, if anything, that can be done. Even if you get 100% of people saying, let's remove equalization from the Constitution, you still need a whole bunch of hurdles to clear to actually get that to happen in this country. And I do not think there's the appetite for that in this country. But having said that, it would give Jason Kenney a tiny bit of, maybe a tiny bit of ammunition, so to speak, the next time he's talking with the other premiers and the prime minister. But I mean, I really don't think that this equalization question was going. The leverage that they talk about it could give them, I really don't see it. I really do not see how it can give this provincial government any leverage. And to be honest with you, Jason Kenney's been vocal enough. I think he's done a great job letting people know where Alberta sits on the equalization question. So I've never been in favor of having this question on the ballot, but it's there. And of course, people have to vote on it.
Lisa, what do you make of that question on the ballot? What are we going to see from that? And what will it signal in terms of the results from Calgarians?
Well, I think, I keep going back to this idea that in some ways, what we're seeing tonight is a referendum on Jason Kenney. And so, if the equalization vote doesn't get a majority yes in Calgary, I think that's a real problem for the premier, not because it gives us leverage. I don't think that it really does. But I think politically, if he isn't able to deliver on this fair deal agenda that he's talked about, then I think that his own political troubles within his party are going to get worse.
We are 45 minutes past those polls closing. We'll check back in with you guys in a little bit. Joel and Linda, we'll throw it back to you for now.
All right, thanks for that, Dallas. And of course, our panel, lots of great insight there. We want to go back to show you the numbers and give you an update, as we're going to continue to do throughout the evening. Oh, we're going to bring in Dwayne and have a chat with Dwayne. I know you're better at the math than me, Dwayne, but what are you seeing this early on to see Jyoti Gondek that far ahead at this point?
No, and what I'm also surprised at is how strong Jeff Davison is doing, at 14%. And I think that obviously the pitch that Farkas gave to the Davison supporters to come to him really isn't working, and that's making a difference. And we're now seeing that it's not a small lead with Gondek. It's actually a lead that's growing with every poll that comes out. So it's been a very good night so far for Jyoti Gondek. I would also touch down, though, on the plebiscite questions, right? The two provincial ones, it's looking like, at least in Calgary, now bear in mind these are provincial-wide, in Calgary, equalization is leading 57-43 percentage-wise, but we know from polling that there was stronger support in Calgary than in Edmonton. There was actually much greater opposition. So we don't see the Edmonton results tonight. It's going to take a while, but it shows just how tight the equalization is going to be. And daylight savings time is losing. Over 54% of people are voting against going to permanent daylight savings time. And on the fluoridation referendum, which is Calgary exclusive, it's 60-40 in favor of putting fluoride back in the water supply.
Dwayne, we're seeing results come in from all over the city, really. Any council races that stand out to you?
Well, I highlighted wards 2 and wards 4 and wards 8 at the beginning. Ward 2, Joe Maglioka is currently trailing. He's in 3rd place and trailing badly. So it sounds like the expense scandal and the RCMP charges have had a major impact on him. On the Ward 4 race, it's still early here, but DJ Kelly is ahead of Sean. 8 polls out of 30, and you can see it there. So whether the news over the weekend had an impact, or whether it's just how closely Sean Chu is tied to the provincial government and tied to Joe Maglioka and tied to Jeremy Farkas, that may have had an impact as well. And the Ward 8 race it looks like Courtney Walcott is picking up a bigger lead. He's now 1,200 votes ahead of Gary Bobrovitz, with 50% of the polls reporting. Gary, as a former, you guys know, former global reporter, political reporter, great experience. But Courtney Walcott, who's a teacher at Western Canada High School, has run a strong campaign, is tied into the diversity movement and Black Lives Matter movement. And it looks like so far it's a good night for Courtney Walcott.
Thanks, Dwayne. So several really interesting wards to keep an eye on tonight. And again, once again, we were telling you about the mayor's race to this point. So we want to go to our Adam MacVicar, who is live at the headquarters for Jyoti Gondek, to see what kind of response they're having tonight when they're seeing the numbers come in.
Yes, thanks very much, Linda. I'm standing here with somebody who many people around the city of Calgary will know, former campaign manager to Naheed Nenshi, former chief of staff Olsen, and now the campaign manager for the Jyoti Gondek campaign, Stephen Carter. Thanks for taking a minute to chat with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, early results coming in showing about a 21,000 vote lead for you guys at this point. How are you feeling right now as these numbers start to trickle in?
Well, I mean, it's still early. We're waiting for more numbers. They're coming in fast and furious now, so we can't really keep up. So we're kind of in the same boat as you guys, waiting to see when Elections Calgary updates them. But obviously, we're in a much better place than we were even expecting at this stage. So very, very pleased.
And so, what were your, I guess, expectations coming into today, and what did the last bit of the get out the vote look like, and how important was that for you guys?
Well, get out the vote for us was all about people bringing their friends to the polls. So there's two types of getting out the vote. There's us calling everybody, and of course we did that. But a mayoralty campaign, especially in a city as large as the city of Calgary, it really requires the population to buy in to the campaign, and population to buy into the ideas behind it and the personality behind it. And that's what we were really able to do with Jyoti Gondek. She had both the personality and the ideas that Calgarians really like right now.
Now, Dwayne, Bratt said that this campaign, not the Gondek campaign, but this whole Calgary municipal election has been, we knew it was going to be strange, but it became a bit stranger than we anticipated it would. So I guess from your perspective, what has this campaign been like over this year since she announced in January?
Well, it's been a whirlwind. I mean, first of all, we had to reinvent campaigning, because now you can't have any private, events. We can't go to people's houses. So we did, like she was doing 3 and 4 Zoom meetings a night with different groups of 10, 15, 20 people, sometimes 4, depending on, how many people were there. And that's a really good way to get to know people. It's also a little bit more control, right? We were in and out in an hour. You didn't have people fussing over the cheese tray. So it was very efficient campaigning. Then we got towards the end. The Stampede was a rough period when the Premier decided that we're going to declare the best summer ever. That was tough for campaigns because we all wanted the best summer ever. No one didn't want that, and to have it fail so spectacularly, it did give us an opportunity, but it was a very difficult one.
Really appreciate your time, Stephen. Best of luck, obviously, tonight as more numbers come in.
We'll spend more time together, though, right?
I anticipate we'll be seeing much of each other for the rest of the night here.
Thanks,
yeah, absolutely. Back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Adam MacVicar, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Hey, we do have some news to tell you about. We have some councillors elected now in this.
All right, we're going to take a look at some of the numbers that are starting to come in. We have some elected, and this is in Ward 1. Sonia Sharp, who is a small business development coordinator with the City of Calgary, or has been and has had a small business. Our decision desk has declared her elected in Ward 1. That was Ward Sutherland's ward, but he chose not to run again and decided to support Jeff Davison in his bid for mayor. And now in Ward 2, Joe Maglioka, the incumbent in this ward, won't be going back to City Hall. Jennifer Wyness, who is a rec facility manager, has run in this ward before. Our decision desk here at Global TV is declaring her elected tonight as well. And then we're going to look at Ward 14. This is one of the longest or longer serving incumbents, Peter DeMong. He's been in office since 2010. And he has been declared elected by our decision desk at 64% in the Ward 14. And this was one of the wards that only had a few candidates, but some, Joel, have had a whole bunch of candidates. We talked about 100 people running in all these wards, and we knew we were going to have a change. But there were 5 incumbents vying to come back, and we know at least one is going back, and at least one is not going back.
And I can now speak.
Yes, there you go.
My
You've got
mic
your
is back
microphone
on.
working.
Yeah, so those results early. Obviously, many more people will be elected in the minutes and hours ahead, so stay tuned, stay with us for that. We want to go to Jamie Dahl now, who is standing by with the Jeremy Farkas campaign. Jamie, any reaction where you are to the results we're seeing so far?
Yeah, Joel, a lot of people surprised, admittingly, that they didn't expect there to be this big of a gap so early out of the gate when those first round of numbers came out, although everyone's saying it's still early in the evening, but they thought that he would be ahead straight out of those gates. Something that I've been hearing over and over is just how much Farkas ran this campaign at a grassroots level, and every dollar had to be raised. That information, of course, we'll learn a little more in the coming days. But there's about 140 people here at Gasoline Alley in Heritage Park. Got members of his family, volunteers, supporters. The mood definitely a little more subdued, people a bit cautious. One man just came up, he said it's not over until it's over, but people are definitely wringing out their hands and a bit of pacing going on.
All right, and we will come back to you, of course, Jamie, to get some more from you in a little bit. But now we're going to take a little bit of a spin around the province because we are following some other areas as well. We've been talking quite a bit about the change in Edmonton, Don Iveson deciding not to run again, and there we see Amarjeet Sohi, who is a former cabinet minister in the Liberal government, is looking like he's in the lead in the race to be mayor in the city of Edmonton. So a change in both big city of Alberta mayors this time around.
Yeah, one of the big differences we see in the two races right now is just in the sheer number of results that we're seeing. 4% of the polls reporting in Edmonton right now, so still very early. We'll keep an eye on that race. We're also watching the city of Lethbridge. No polls yet reporting in that race. As we said earlier tonight, Mayor Chris Spearman not running for re-election. So the city of Lethbridge will have a new mayor out of one of these 6 individuals that you're seeing on your screen right now.
And the same thing in Red Deer. Tara Veer is deciding not to run again, and just 4% of the polls reporting there in Red Deer, but they will have a new mayor as well. And at the moment, with early numbers, Ken Johnston is in the lead in Red Deer, and there's some of the other candidates running for mayor in that city. Now we want to go to Lauren Pullen, who's taking a look at some of the other outlying areas that we're keeping an eye on tonight. Lauren?
Linda, we are still tracking and watching those results as they're coming in on the touch screen here. The ones that are highlighted darker blue is where we have seen those results coming in. In those outlying areas, it's still just Airdrie that's reporting right now. But I do want to take you to one of the interesting races that is going on in the Banff area. We have 4 people vying for that mayoral position. Of course, we know that Mayor Karen Sorensen, had moved on to a Senate position. Corey DeMano was elected by Town Council to fill her shoes as the mayor. She then threw her name officially into the hat for this mayoral fall election. She's taking on Gary Gilmore, who is a well-known local, says he's been living in the town for quite some time, so he knows the politics. He knows what needs to happen. Taking on Brian Standish as well, who is a very familiar face. 11 years on Banff Town Council, so he is vying for that mayoral spot as well. And Karen Thomas, who is a longtime Banff resident. She actually started her own business in Banff in 1986, so her business roots run incredibly deep. One of the big focuses for every single one of these candidates is getting Banff's economy back on track. Of course, we know they were hit incredibly hard due to COVID-19. Banff actually makes up a third of all the tourism dollars that come into Alberta. So $3 billion of that $9 billion total to Alberta. So whoever does fill into that mayor chair will have some big shoes and some big issues to tackle when they are in fact elected tonight. So again, we will be keeping an eye on the races and the numbers and the storylines throughout the evening for you. Joel, Linda?
All right, thank you so much, Lauren. We want to bring Dwayne Bratt back in, political scientist, because we have some results now that we can talk about in at least projected finality, Dwayne. And one of them in the council race was in Ward 2 that you really highlighted. Right now, Joe Maglioka in 3rd. He could finish 4th in this race.
He could finish 4th. Yeah, I mean, it's... It really shows. Don't get involved in an expensive scandal, and especially don't get a police charge 2 weeks before an election. It's not good for your campaign. But we also talked about the role of women in municipal politics. This could be the night of the female politician. Jyoti Gondek is currently leading by almost 30,000 votes, but you've already declared Ward 1 with Sonia Sharp as the winner. You've put Jennifer Wyness from Ward 2 as a winner. Ward 3, Jasmine Mian, is also leading. This could be a much bigger transformation of City Council from a gender perspective than we've seen in a very long time.
Talk a little bit, we're looking at Ward 2 there, and we'll keep running through the numbers, but talk a little bit more about Ward 2 and Jennifer Wyness and what she brings to the table.
Well, she ran against Joe Maglioka in 2017. She is running sort of on the more progressive side of the ticket. Kim Tyers, who is in second place, is a conservative alternative to Joe Maglioka. So it's a fresh face. It's a new start. It's a different perspective that we're going to see on City Council.
And the other candidate that we elected in Ward 14, our decision desk, Peter Demong, someone who's been around for a long time. What's it going to be like now with what likely will be a very different council going forward?
I think a lot is going to rely on people like Peter Demong to bring some experience to the table. I think the more remarkable thing is he's at 63%. Typically he wins, 80, 90%. So a bit tougher of a race for him, but still, anytime you can win with 60%, it's pretty good. I will say on the female candidate side though, Diane Colley Urquhart, who is the longest serving councillor, first elected in 2000, is trailing with over half the polls in by almost 2,000 votes to Dan McLean. Dan McLean is running as a much more stronger conservative, fiscal conservative, and so we may see one female incumbent lose and a whole bunch of new females coming aboard.
Another really close race in Ward 4 between DJ Kelly and Sean Chu. I'm not sure if we have a moment to talk about that or if we are restarting at the top of the hour. Oh, we can talk about that. Okay, so let's talk about that race.
DJ Kelly, who's got a background in running campaigns and working with campaigns. He worked with Naheed Nenshi back in 2010, has a narrow lead over Sean Chu, and we've discussed some of the issues facing Chu over the last couple days, but I think it's also that tie to the provincial government, right? And because you've got Maglioka, Chu, and Jeremy Farkas that are most closely associated with the Kenny government, and all three are doing poorly tonight.
Dwayne, you talked about Ward 8, and it's a very diverse ward. It's re-elected people, it's not re-elected people, it's gone all over the place. What are you seeing there tonight? I mean, we see Courtney Walcock, who you said has been a very strong candidate. What are you seeing there?
It is, and it is very diverse. Crowchild Trail really divides it. So you've got part of the downtown core, you've got some of the Beltline, then you've got, when you cross Crowchild Trail into places like Killarney and Richmond, and right now, with 28 out of 35 polls reporting, Walcott's got a 1,600 vote lead over Gary Bobrovitz. Still a bit too early to call, but if I'm Courtney Walcott, this looks pretty damn good to me.
Okay, so let's go back to that race for Calgary Mayor, and I'm not sure if we have the graphics that can go back up or not, but we do see Jyoti Gondek with about 45% of the vote so far. The three councillors leading the way, Dwayne, you mentioned them off the top. Why do you think it was so hard? Why do you think it was so hard, Dwayne, for Jan Damery and Brad Field to make inroads in this today, so far, at least in what we're seeing?
For a couple reasons. One is it wasn't one or two councillors running, it was three councillors, right? And so three takes up a lot of oxygen as opposed to two, which would have allowed for a non-councillor to get in there. But then you've got the federal election. And even though the federal election was, 35 days, the speculation about the federal election went on for weeks and months. Then you have COVID, which completely changed campaigning strategies. And you had so much discussion about the provincial government. So it was tough for either Jan Damery or Brad Field to get much attraction. And Brad is at 5% and Jan is at 2%. So it really shows the benefits of the name recognition of being a city councillor. And of the three, going into the election, Jeff Davison probably had the least name recognition Political watchers knew who he was. Political watchers knew his role in, for example, negotiating the arena deal, but he didn't have the public profile that a Farkas or a Gondek did, and I think that hurt him. So having Farkas and Gondek getting out early obviously made a difference, and this looks like a vote against Jeremy Farkas as much as it is a vote for Jyoti Gondek. I think Gondek ran a strong campaign, but Farkas had alienated other councillors, had other candidates. He had a very strong core, but he had trouble building it. And over the course of the spring and summer, those undecided voters started to swing to Jyoti Gondek. And this is looking not like a narrow lead, but a 16-point lead for Jyoti Gondek.
Yeah, so now we keep an eye on Edmonton as well, because we've talked a little bit tonight about what that relationship looks like with those two powerhouse cities in the province. And do they combine forces, or do they fight against each other?
Well, with Iveson and Nenshi, they combined forces against the provincial government. They actually worked quite well with Rachel Notley and the NDP, but the relationship really turned when the UCP was elected in 2019, particularly over COVID. But if Gondek holds on and Amarjit Sohi holds on in Edmonton, you know, you're having a progressive mayor in Calgary and a former Liberal cabinet minister in Edmonton. I don't think things are going to get any better for Kenny right now.
Okay, Dwayne, Bratt, let's continue on our conversation with Dwayne. We got you here. We might as well use you, right?
Yeah.
So as we look at, I guess, how this mayoral race is shaping up, I don't want to, ask you to predict what's about to happen, but if we could talk about maybe some of the implications, what they would be if these results continue to hold forward in the next weeks and months ahead, especially given that council will have so many new people on it.
It will have a lot of new people on it, but we will have an experienced mayor, so not a newbie coming on. And a lot of the major projects, the contracts have already been signed, right? The Green Line contracts have been signed, the arena deal has been signed, but it's going to be following through on those projects. So it's one skill set to negotiate a deal that involves funding from multiple stakeholders. So on the Green Line, it involved federal money, provincial money, city money. Now it's going to be in the project implementation stage that is just as important as getting it off the ground. Same thing with the arena, right? You're still having that relationship with the Flames ownership, but a lot of spin-off projects. How will that project go ahead? How will costs be controlled? What other spin-offs can happen? So it's not a big deal in a sense. It's the implementation of those big deals.
All right. Thanks very much, Dwayne.
You're welcome.
And our Global News Decision Desk is declaring Jyoti Gondek as the next mayor-elect of Calgary, 37th mayor, the first female mayor in the city of Calgary. Jeremy Farkas with 30% of the vote, Jyoti Gondek 45% of the vote at this stage. She is the mayor-elect.
Yeah, 77% of polls reporting now we can make that decision. Jyoti Gondek, there it is, 45% of the vote so far. Let's go over to Adam MacVicker, who I believe is standing by live. He is right now with reaction, Adam.
Yes, thanks, guys. This all started in the 80s when the late Sue Higgins ran for the first time as a woman running for mayor. She did come up short, and then Bev Longstaff in 2001, coming just short by 4,200 votes, losing to Dave Bronkanye. But tonight, Jyoti Gondek making City of Calgary history, becoming the first woman elected mayor of our city. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, we are in a bit of a smaller event venue here because of all the COVID precautions. So there's very few people here. So we're still waiting for that excitement, the woos and the cheering. I did speak with Jyoti Gondek's campaign manager just briefly. He said, "We won. I'm feeling pretty good." That's a bit censored to what he actually did tell me. But yes, we're going to be hearing from the candidate coming up just a little bit later on this evening. She will be speaking, and we'll carry it live when she does do that. Back to you.
Adam, yes, we will be hearing from Jyoti Gondek. Now we see Jeremy Farkas is just coming into his campaign headquarters, and he's about to speak, so we're going to listen in there. Our Jamie Dahl is watching
everyone.
over that. Let's listen in to Jeremy Farkas.
It is my incredible privilege to speak with you today from Heritage Park and Gasoline Alley. This place is a tribute to Calgary and Alberta's grit, determination, and our incredible energy industry. We also give thanks for being able to live, work, love, play, and learn on this land in peace as treaty people. We gather today in a place where all peoples, Calgarians, and newcomers alike connect with the history of our first pioneers, as well as the culture of the Métis and Treaty 7 First Nations. My story, like the stories of many who call the city home, begins elsewhere. Tonight marks almost to the day, the 65th anniversary of the Hungarian Revolution and my father's arrival to Canada as a refugee. And when my family came to Canada, they saw our city as much more than a place to find a job. Calgary is something that you can't find just anywhere else, the promise of a fresh start. So many doors were closed to my parents, but as Calgarians, they worked hard to make sure that those same doors would be made open to me. And while we may not have had a lot of money, we had a lot of opportunity. And Calgarians, whether we were born here or not, we gathered here on this land to build homes, businesses, lives, and futures. And that's what we've done tonight. It may seem like a small thing, but it isn't. By voting, you took part in building our city, and that's what you do every day as Calgarians, working hard for your families. Thank you to the many candidates who put forward their name to run for mayor, and congratulations to Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek. Thank you, Jyoti, for your tremendous service and your incredible vision of tremendous potential that you put forward for our city, and that platform that you earned the trust of Calgarians to execute on. Your vision for a community of economic, social, and environmental resilience beckons us as a reminder of the city that we're so proud of and we want to keep building. I take to heart that you, as our next mayor, will represent not just those who voted for you, but those of us who advocated for change. You've earned the trust of Calgarians to lead, and I hope that you lead by example. To Jeff, Brad, Jan, and all the other incredible candidates for mayor, I congratulate you on campaigning during such an incredibly difficult time. To everyone running at the ward and trustee levels, it takes so much courage to put your name on the ballot in ordinary times, let alone in times like these. I think looking back in the history books, we can say that this is an election unlike any other, and I hope that this was a one-off. So to all of those other candidates, you've put yourself out there, and the sheer number and quality of Calgarians and candidates showcases the incredible desire that Calgarians had for change. And to our departing councillors and Mayor Nenshi, thank you for your incredible service, and I hope that you'll continue to contribute to our city in meaningful ways, just as I intend to. This election is done, but the process of creating Calgary's future is just beginning. To do that requires your continued civic engagement. Our community needs your energy, we need your ideas, and we need your compassion in helping our neighbors. And based on your past service, I know that you will continue to contribute. To my constituents, speaking as Ward 11 councillor, serving as your representative in City Council has been, I would say, the experience of a lifetime. Having the opportunity to be able to serve as one of the youngest city councillors ever elected, as one of the first in my family to be able to finish high school, one of the first to be able to finish university. Stories like mine in a place like Calgary, they're not the rule, or rather they're not the exception, but rather stories like mine are the rule. And I think it speaks to the incredible community that we've built here together. Finally, a short message to our volunteers. Thank you to the incredible members, past and present, of our team. You've shown the incredible influence and power of the grassroots. And I know that tonight is not the result that we were working toward, but I think that it is still a result that we can be incredibly proud of. A more complete thank you will be forthcoming in the coming weeks as we have the opportunity to reach out to our many generous volunteers and donors. I wanted to acknowledge our campaign cabinet, and I would just say that you know who you are because no ordinary person accidentally joins a daily conference call at 7 a.m. So firstly, I wanted to acknowledge Marina Mason. Marina, you've been my rock. You've been an incredible inspiration to me. And I thought the hours were long, but having somebody around like you, I felt that the hours may have been long, but the days were short. I saw each and every single day how you're an incredible inspiration to the people around you. You had high expectations, but I think those expectations were met by the team that you were able to build by scratch, or from scratch, all incredible unpaid volunteers. Thank you to Chris Carlisle as my Chris, as my incredible right-hand man on council, you've been an incredible influence to me. I would like to say that you were instrumental in keeping me out of trouble, but I think that the amount of trouble that I still continue to find, I don't think anybody could have gotten me out of. So thank you, Chris, for your incredible work and the leadership that you've given not just to this campaign, but as my chief of staff in our ward office. Thank you to Lindsay Seawalt. Lindsay, thank you. Lindsay, thank you for your incredible ability to, I'm not going to say tell stories, but help me communicate in a way that I feel that many other councillors have just been unable or unwilling to do. You know, it's no small feat that as a ward office over the past 4 years, we could host 50 town hall meetings. And there's an incredible amount of work that goes into hosting the public through such a fashion, as well as to be able to respond on a daily basis to ward office constituent calls. One thing that's often said of the ward office is that everybody gets a phone call back. And I think that that is something that not every other office could brag about. And thank you so much to Mindy Slade. Mindy, can you give me a wave so I can see you? Oh. Mindy, thank you so much for the incredible work, the long hours. And you know, I think it would be an understatement to say that you were on call, because that sort of assumes some duties every once in a while outside of office hours. But you know, I've grown to see you much more than a friend, a trusted advisor, a counselor. You have been able to be there for me and pull through for me and perform miracles on behalf of not just this campaign, but through our ward office as my executive advisor. And I've been so incredibly grateful, not just to see the work that you do, but how you've grown in that position. And I'm incredibly grateful for the work that you've done, not just for me, but the more than 100,000 Calgarians who may have had the opportunity to interact with our office. So thank you very much, Mindy. And I want to mention my two great friends in life. To my friends Austin and Nancy. No matter how tall the mountain was to climb, thank you for being there for me. Thank you for being willing to tell me when I needed to, what I needed to hear, when I needed to hear it the most. And you bring out the best in me, and I know that I would not be here if not for you. And lastly, to my mom and to my dad. My mom, Marianne, and to my dad, Peter, who are with me here tonight. Just like your incredible parents before you, Steve Tisha, Liz Tisha, Mary Kovac, Stefan Farkas. You told me that because I was Canadian, that there would be no limits on what I can do, who I could be, where I could go. And your work made that dream a reality for me. And the fact that I could be here now, that I've been blessed with the opportunity to make that true for others. Not despite growing up in Dover, but because I grew up in Dover. It's because of you that the doors that were closed to you were made open to me, and I'm incredibly grateful. Lastly, to the incredible council that's been elected, I wish you all the very best. Under the leadership of Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek, now I believe is the time for us to come together as Calgarians, to wish this new council well, to hope that they can seize the opportunities, they can meet the challenges that are in front of us as a community, as a city. The mountain is tall to climb indeed, but I feel that despite the fact that this may not have been the change that we were all working toward and that we were all hoping for, that still there are some silver linings. So again, in the closing remarks, I would just say, now is the time to come together. Now is the time for us to support our next mayor. Now is the time to support our next council and wish them well on continuing that incredible journey that we've experienced as a city, as a community. So in a final round of applause, I would please ask to all here present, let's please wish Councillor and Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek well in her service to Calgarians.
You've been listening to Jeremy Farkas speak after we, Global News and other media outlets, are projecting that Jyoti Gondek will be the next mayor of the city of Calgary. Jeremy Farkas right now with 199 of the 259 polls reporting. Jeremy Farkas sitting in second with 30% of the vote. And again, Global News projecting Jyoti Gondek will be the next mayor of our city.
And as we just listened to Jeremy Farkas in his concession speech, he was very gracious, and we're going to bring in Dwayne Bratt to talk a little bit more about this now. And Dwayne, I said he was gracious, but he was also very emotional. You talk about these long campaigns, even though it was condensed in the last month because of the federal election, but just the emotional weight after a night like this. He talked about climbing to the top of the hill, and then you get to the top of the hill and that's it. So he's clearly emotional and gracious, but also, what's next for Jeremy Farkas?
That's a big question. I agree. I thought it was a gracious speech. I thought he called for people to work together. And this was a man who's been a lot of a contrarian on city council, saying voters now need to support the new council, and he hopes that they work well together. It was a graciousness we hadn't seen much in the campaign, so I thank Jeremy Farkas for that. And you're right, there was a lot of emotion there when he was talking about his family and his hardworking campaign friends. It is tough to lose an election on television, right? And having to go out and speak is not an easy thing for him to do. Who knows where Jeremy Farkas is going to go? He's still young. He's got lots of opportunities. You know, I'm struck in 2010. Rick McIver was seen as the front runner. Rick McIver had been planning to run for mayor for years. He had set a position out on city council. Then he loses, and it looked like Rick McIver's career was over. Then 2 years later, he's elected as a provincial politician and then becomes a cabinet minister for Olsen Redford, becomes a cabinet minister for Jim Prentice, becomes a cabinet minister for Jason Kenney, key architect of the Ring Road. And so that was a path of recovery, but that's rare. So let's see what Farkas does. He's still in his 30s. He does have a political bug. I don't think we've heard the last of Jeremy Farkas.
Well, let's just look back for a second, because he did say to that point that the process of creating Calgary's future is just beginning. He wants to be part of that process going forward. But if we look back just briefly here, you know, what sort of legacy does he leave on the council, on Calgary's council?
It's hard. No, he doesn't really have a legacy on council. That's the issue. I think he might have a future. But if you think about the 4 years, it was 4 years of controversy, right? It was 4 years of being a constant no vote on council, either being voted out 12-3 or 13-2 or sometimes 14-1. It was about being censured by his colleagues multiple times. And so, you know, what did he actually build? What did he actually create? Where is his legacy? I think Jeff Davison, who's gone down to defeat tonight, can point to, you know, I worked on the Green Line, and especially I worked hard on the new arena. I'm not sure what Jeremy Farkas can point to.
You know, Jeremy Farkas, in his speech just now, he did, like you said, talk about, you know, asking people to support Jyoti Gondek, the mayor-elect, and work with her in that spirit of working together. You referenced also earlier tonight Jeremy Farkas's letter during the campaign, just in the last few days, and reaching out and talking about, you know, if and when he wins, he would do well to work with Brad Field's supporters and Jeff Davison's supporters. Do you foresee that same kind of thing with Jyoti Gondek's team and reaching out and to work with Jeremy Farkas, her main opponent's people?
No.
No, they're two.
They're two different people. I can't imagine Jyoti Gondek working with Jeremy Farkas. Can I see Gondek maybe calling for advice with Jeff Davison? Sure I can. Can I see Gondek getting on the phone with Naheed Nenshi? Sure I can. But I don't think there's going to be many phone calls between Gondek and Farkas. But good on Farkas for congratulating her and willing to work with her.
All right, Dwayne, Bratt, we'll leave it there for now. We have more breaking news. Well, we did say we'd be watching other races, and we are. And Global News can say that Amarjeet Sohi is mayor-elect in the city of Edmonton, with Mike Nickel coming in second. Sohi, 44% of the vote so far, with 83% of polls reporting. Mike Nickel with 26%. Of course, Amarjeet Sohi, a former Edmonton city councillor, then went to federal politics, a former federal cabinet minister in the Trudeau government, and now will be the next mayor of Edmonton.
Yes, he was natural resources minister as well when he was in cabinet. And of course, there you also see that strong city council in Edmonton contingent, with those top three contenders all being current or former councillors.
In the city of Airdrie, Global News projects that Peter Brown will be elected in that city. So we have results coming in. And now, to discuss those results and many other things, Dallas Flexog is standing by with our expert panel.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joel and Linda. Quick hockey update, 2-1 into the second for the Calgary Flames. Some very interesting things happening in those. Linda's clapping for the Flames. Yes, home opener, big night there too. Interesting things happening with the ward races as well. Sean Chu has now just pulled ahead of DJ Kelly in Ward 4, so we'll keep an eye on that one. It appears that Andre Chabot might be headed back to City Council chamber, and Richard Pootmans as well. But let's bring in our panel now for reaction to Jeremy Farkas and his concession speech as Jyoti Gondek has been named mayor-elect of Calgary. We did see a lot of emotion there, Jason. What are you making of what Farkas said there and where he might go from here?
Well, first, let me say congratulations to Mayor-elect Dr. Jyoti Gondek. This is a historic victory for the most qualified candidate in the race, as I've been saying tonight. But look, I get everything Jeremy Farkas just said. It felt genuine. It felt earnest. He said all the right things, but I have seen him do that time and time again before, just after he's been called on the carpet for throwing a hand grenade into the city council sphere. So as much as I feel for him and his supporters tonight, it's not easy to put your name on a ballot. You know, I have to think, where was this guy that was featured in Rick Bell columns every single week? Who was the guy that was the tough talker? And so again, I think that we're starting to see the two sides to Jeremy Farkas. In person, he's a very earnest, very thoughtful, nice man. And I fear that this political theater that he was caught up in, that, you know, in many cases, a lot of folks enabled, is the reason for the result that we have tonight. People do not want political theater. They want practical, earnest, thoughtful solutions. And the campaign that was forwarding that was victorious tonight.
Some strong words from Jason there. Lisa, what is next for Farkas? And was there one thing, do you think, that lost this race for him, as we did see in those polls? They were pretty close heading into tonight.
Yeah, well, I think we can't put too much weight on those polls. It's always a question of turnout, and what we said earlier in the night was that Gondek really was benefiting from momentum, right? That as people were paying more attention to the race, they were looking at her, they were looking at her experience, they were looking at her message, and they bought in some ways. I do think that it's no coincidence here that we see the two mayoral candidates in both Calgary and in Edmonton who were most closely associated with the provincial UCP government underperformed. So I do think there was an element here of a referendum on the provincial government, and some messages here that I think they should take quite seriously moving forward. So, in terms of where we would expect Farkas to end up, as others have said tonight, I don't think his political career is over. He is very much, closely associated with the Manning Centre for Conservatives, and I would imagine that he will head back there and think about his next move.
Lots to talk about there for sure. Lots to talk about as well. Once we do hear from Jyoti Gondek, now Mayor-elect of Calgary, we'll throw things back over to Joel and Linda, though, as those results do keep coming in.
All right, thanks very much, Dallas. Yeah, and we are keeping an eye on a whole bunch of the wards tonight to see what the new look council will be like. And there are a few that we have already declared. Sonia Sharp in Ward 1, Jennifer Wyness in Ward 2, and in Ward 14, one of the veteran city councillors, I was going to say alderman, but that goes back a ways, city councillors, Peter Demong. So there is definitely change in the air, and starting with the mayor-elect, and that is Jyoti Gondek.
Yeah, change in the air for sure. And when we look at some of those other races that we are following for council right now, there are some very close races with incumbents trying to get back their seats. So there's a lot more to watch, even though obviously we do know Jyoti Gondek will be the next mayor of Calgary. There are a number of races that will make up the rest of council with incumbents trying to win back their seats. And obviously if those incumbents don't, then we have even a bigger, I guess, I'm not sure what to call it, rookie council, new faces on Calgary City Council.
And we're going to keep updating all those numbers for you, so you hope you can stay with us tonight, and we'll be back with more right after this. And breaking news now, the Global News Desk is declaring a winner in the city's 103rd civic election. Jyoti Gondek will be the next mayor of Calgary.
Mayoral candidate Jeremy Farkas conceding just moments ago from his campaign's party headquarters in Heritage Park. Farkas gave the mayor-elect credit for all the work she's already done during her time on council, and for everything she's done to win over voters to take the mayor's chair.
Congratulations to Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek. Thank you, Jyoti, for your tremendous service and your incredible vision of tremendous potential that you put forward for our city, and that platform that you earned the trust of Calgarians to execute on. Your vision for a community of economic, social, and environmental resilience beckons us as a reminder of the city that we're so proud of and we want to keep building.
Again, the votes are still being officially tallied, but Jyoti Gondek will, we have declared, be the next mayor-elect of Calgary.
Yeah, right now leading by more than 30,000 votes. Of course, that's not the only race that we're following tonight. It is the one that has the entire city watching. But races for council, many still too close to call. So you can join us live on YouTube, Amazon Prime, the Global TV app, and globalnews.ca/Calgary, or you can listen live on the radio at 770 CHQR. Come back here on Global News Television at 11 o'clock for a recap.
Lots of big change, and you're starting to get a sense of how things are shaping up in Calgary City Council. We're going to go back to Dallas and our panel for more on this conversation tonight. Dallas?
Lots to talk about, certainly, Joel and Linda. Let's go back to our panel, though. Ted, I'll give you word that you didn't have before when we watched the concession speech from Jeremy Farkas there. What were your initial thoughts?
I agree with Jason, what he was saying earlier. I thought Jeremy Farkas was quite sincere. And every interaction I've ever had with Jeremy Farkas has been a sincere one. And I wonder if, well, I mean, there's always question marks, right? Like what happens during an election campaign when you're kind of in the front and then the momentum kind of sweeps you into second place. It's always interesting to see what happens. What's next for Jeremy Farkas? I could easily see him running for the UCP in the next provincial election. His signs were all over his riding in Southwest Calgary. And I mean, obviously he was the councillor there while he was running for mayor, but his signs were all over the place. And any feedback that we got on my show in the afternoon was always quite positive, especially via the text line from people who said they were from that part of the city in particular. So I would not be surprised to see Jeremy running in provincial politics down the road here, maybe in a couple of years.
Let's talk about the mayor-elect then, Jyoti Gondek, as we do watch some interesting races in the councillors and the wards coming up, which hopefully we can talk about as well. But what is next for Jyoti Gondek? What can we expect out of a speech from her tonight? Jason?
I expect what I think I've been waiting for, and many people have been waiting for, is the usual sort of trimmings on the end of a campaign, the thank yous, but also a declaration of what this moment is. Not just the history, being the first mayor-elect, female mayor-elect of this city, but also, you know, this is coming up with some extra history as well. Jyoti Gondek is a person of color who looks like members of my own family. You know, this is an incredibly diverse city with a third of our city as visible minority. And we have had 11 years of a mayor who was at the time the first Muslim mayor in North America. What her election tonight signals is that this is not a fad. This is not a trend. Naheed Nenshi was not a one-off. The most qualified people is who we elect in this city. And so I expect not only an acknowledgement of the history, but then a vision that I think really can bring in all of these new faces and some returning faces around the council horseshoe to rally behind what will be a community agenda, a positive agenda. It's going to be a tall task. There's a lot of challenges as we've gone over week through week facing our city, but her ability to define that moment and say how she and the new council is going to meet it is what I expect to hear tonight from the mayor-elect.
Hopefully that will be shortly. Dwayne mentioned, Lisa, that this could be the night of the female politician. We are seeing a number of female councillors pulling ahead, and of course the first mayor of Calgary being a woman, the 37th mayor of Calgary. Do you think this could be the night of the female politician, and what will that signal for the city?
Well, I think it certainly, we see a lot of progress here for women on council, but we also, you know, we've seen one incumbent not be returned, Diane Colley-Urquhart, in all likelihood, and of course we have Drew Farrell, who has retired from council. So the numbers, tentative numbers right now look like we'll have 5 women on council, which is certainly a step forward, but it's not that parity council necessarily, but with a woman in the mayor's seat, certainly council is going to look different. I think we should also comment just on the diversity, ethnic diversity of the council. It really is going to be a council that in many ways looks like Calgary. And I think that that's a very positive thing for the city.
Lisa, does that finally mean we've reached our metropolitan status as a city in Calgary?
I don't know if that's necessarily, where we set the bar, but I do think, there are times when the rest of the country has a lot of stereotypes about what Calgary is, and those were disrupted in some ways when Mayor Nenshi was first elected. But I think, this again speaks to the Calgary that we know, that is so much more complex and diverse and sophisticated than some of the outside perceptions really would suggest.
Let's talk about some of the councillor races that are happening right now. It looks like Joe Maglioka is going to be out at this point. It looks like Sean Chu might be re-elected in Ward 4. Right now he is sitting in the lead ahead of DJ Kelly, but that is still a close race. It looks like Diane Collier-Urquhart might be saying goodbye to council chambers as well. What are you seeing shape up with the council races right now, Ted?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Sean Chu, as you mentioned, barely hanging on. Diane Collier-Urquhart, she could be gone. Giancarlo Carra is in one heck of a fight right now in his ward for sure. I'm just looking at the latest numbers. Actually, he's up by about 500 votes with only one more poll to come. So he may get reelected here, but Naomi Withers giving him one heck of a race in Ward 9. It's a lot of fun to see those numbers coming in, you know what I mean, and seeing who's winning and who's not. But I was frankly surprised, to be honest with you. And I don't know if Jason and Lisa can weigh in on this, but I was surprised to see Diane Collier-Urquhart performing so poorly in her riding, unless this is just a vote against kind of the established council that was, right? I'm not sure how to read this exactly, but I'm surprised to see Diane Collier-Urquhart out.
Yeah, she's the longest standing councillor we have. Peter Demong, he looks at this point to be re-elected in his ward. So there is not a vote for change there, but perhaps a vote for change. Is that what this signals, Jason? What are you seeing in those ward races?
Yeah, I think it's very important to note how disconnected sometimes the macro narrative about Calgary can be from those individual communities. In Diane Collier-Urquhart's ward, you had a candidate, Dan McLean, who was aligned with the Take Back City Hall movement that declared his candidacy years in advance. He almost pulled a Farkas-like move where he was knocking on doors and getting involved in civic politics for years in advance of this election and has been rewarded tonight. You're seeing a sort of similar effect in Ward 9 with Giancarlo Carra, who's in a very, very tight battle. And when you think about that at the macro level, you've never heard the names of the people that I just mentioned that may be taking their places around the council horseshoe. But in those communities, they have very strong feelings about those incumbents and increasingly strong feelings about potentially leading council candidates or elected councillors, as we've just seen right now. So it's very important that we understand that there are people who feel in and people who feel out of this city. And a lot of folks that have been feeling out of this city are giving their say tonight.
You say you have worked with both Sonia Sharp, who now is elected in Ward 1, a new face to City Council, and also with Peter Demong, who is going to be carrying the burden of the experienced guy, the vet on council. What is that going to look like?
Yeah, and the ones that we've declared, the council races that we've declared, there are some great people that have been either re-elected or elected tonight. Sonia Sharp and Peter Demong were members of the city's Business Advisory Council and Committee, which actually did a lot of the COVID responsiveness work out of the city manager's office with a lot of private sector and community leaders like myself. They were always earnest, thoughtful, wanted to do what was best for constituents. It is good to see them rewarded tonight, particularly Sonia Sharp, who worked in the city manager's office, who knows how to work with administration and is now going to be able to do that from a city councilor chair. I think that's going to be an incredibly interesting development for also some former city staff that are either leading or contentious in some of the other ward races, like Ward 7 with Terry Wong, a 30-plus year vet for the city of Calgary.
We're looking at Ward 12 here now, Lisa. Evan Spencer handily in the lead over Craig Chandler, who we know had a cease and desist order against him by Shane Keating just for what was happening with Evan Spencer and that narrative there. There is a lot of storylines that did unfold with this election when it comes to these councillors. Is this playing out how you might have thought it would?
You know, as Jason said, it's really sort of all over the map, right? There are these stories that don't fit some grand narrative that we might construct here. You know, to some extent, I think we can see some trends. You know, if we look at a lot of the candidates who you might identify as being, you know, centrist or progressive, a lot of those did well, particularly in some of the sort of closer in wards. But that's not, you know, clear across the board. We're going to have, I think, real sort of ideological diversity on this new council.
We could see Richard Pootmans go back into City Hall. We could see Andre Chabot go back into City Hall. Are they going to be shook with the changes that they've seen over the last couple of years? We're dealing with a pandemic. We're dealing with property taxes, which have been an issue for a number of years, but perhaps more so now. What could this new council be facing in terms of the issues? Because there are certainly a lot of them for our city. Ted.
I think their experience being around the council table before will certainly help them get up to speed as quickly as they need to. And hopefully they can be leaned upon as well, much like Peter Demong will be most likely by all the quote-unquote rookie councillors that are going to be taking their seats. As for the issues and things, yeah, like we talked about during the Global News Hour at 6 o'clock tonight, I really think that the property tax, residential, non-residential connection to revitalizing downtown, connection to energizing the non-energy industries and kind of generating some tax revenue that way. I think that's job number one. But of course, I should say job number 0, I guess, would be to get to know your colleagues on council and learn to work with them, of course, because you are going to be working, you're going to be working right beside all these people for at least 4 years to come.
We got to wrap here, but Jason, I know you want to have a word about potentially seeing Andre Chabot and Richard Pootmans back in City Hall.
Yeah, just a quick take here, about their veteran experience. One of the things that I think is going to be challenging for them is the world has changed. It's demanding a lot more new thinking, and I think that's going to be a challenge for long-standing veterans of that city council horseshoe. Yes, they were facing ongoing challenges. Calgary's transforming all the time. But mental health and addictions, a hollowing out of the downtown core, COVID-19 pandemic response, these are weighty issues, and we'll have to see if they're bringing new solutions, not just a redo of what they brought in councils past.
Oh, weighty issues is a good way to put that for sure. Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Much more to talk about as this night unfolds in a pretty exciting and developing way. Joel and Linda.
Thanks, Dallas. All right, and we want to have a conversation with Dwayne Bratt about this as well. And we talked a lot about some new faces and some faces who've been there before. I don't want to say older faces, but Richard Pootmans and Andre Chabot look like they are going back to City Council. So Dwayne, when you talk about this really new look council, this campaign, it seems to me, has been a lot more partisan that we've seen in the past. So how do you see that dynamic starting to shape up on this new look council?
Well, and that's exactly where I want to go. Earlier on in the evening, Lisa Young was saying we need to look at themes of the night. And I think there are 3 themes. One is the newness and the rapid turnover in City Council. Richard Pootmans and Andre Chabot are coming back. They don't know anybody outside of Peter Demong, so there's going to be a lot of introductions. The second is, I think it was a night for female politicians. Not quite gender parity, but pretty darn close and a big improvement from what we've had in the past. And I would say the third theme gets at that partisanship, and that was a real vote against Jason Kenney and the provincial government tonight. There were 3 members of council who were very closely associated with the UCP. They were at the conventions. There's a lot of photos with Kenney and a lot of photos with Casey Maddow. They were Jeremy Farkas, who lost tonight, Joe Maglioka, who lost tonight, Sean Chu, who's in the fight of his life right now and could very well lose by the end of the night. And if he doesn't, he barely squeaks by, but he's got bigger problems starting tomorrow morning over some of these allegations of when he was a police officer. Then we turn to the referendums. Daylight savings time is losing in Calgary. Now, these are provincial-wide referendums, so Calgary doesn't decide it. And they are winning on the equalization, but less than 60%. And we know from polling that there was greater support for equalization, for getting rid of it from the Constitution in Calgary than in Edmonton. So let's see how that plays out. But it looks like a real strong rebuke of the UCP tonight by the city of Calgary.
We are waiting to hear from Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek, and we will for sure bring that speech once it begins to you here live on our coverage. I think it might be good just to reset our audience on those council races, because I want to continue that conversation with you, Dwayne. So far, Global News projecting Sonia Sharp winning in Ward 1, Jennifer Wyness in Ward 2, Jasmine Meehan in Ward 3, Richard Pootmans in Ward 6. You're seeing some of them come across the screen. Andre Chabot in Ward 10, Evan Spencer in Ward 12, Dan McLean in Ward 13, and Peter DeMong in Ward 14. Those are the councillors we, Global News, is projecting to have 1 seats tonight. I want to touch on Ward 13 because you did mention to me earlier, Dwayne, that it was going to be tough for Diane Colley-Urquhart to win back her seat. And right now, she's in 3rd. She's not going to win it back. We already know that Dan McLean's going to council. What do you make of that result?
I mean, it's almost like a boxer who goes into the ring one too many times. I mean, Diane Colley-Urquhart was first elected in 2000. She's trying to go beyond 21 years in council. 21 years in any job is a very long period of time. And so, you know, I think the message is, you know, you've got to know when to retire, but, you know, politics is a drug. Just like boxing is a drug, and you always believe that you can keep winning until you don't. And I think that's what happened to Diane Colley-Urquhart tonight.
I wanted to drill down on another riding that maybe you can talk a little bit about, or Ward 12, Evan Spencer, constituency assistant to Shane Keating.
That's a very interesting
Yeah, Shane
race.
Keating was there for a long time. So what does that just kind of keep things rolling along, or what does that look like?
No, where the unusual thing isn't Evan Spencer, it's Craig Chandler. So Craig Chandler, who is battling out for 2nd or 3rd and well behind Evan Spencer, a very divisive character. He's been involved in conservative politics in this province for decades, once famously won a progressive conservative nomination, and Ed Stelmach refused to sign his nomination papers. He has worked on multiple campaigns, including Jason Kenney's campaigns in 2019. He advertises himself as the conservative, the progressive group of independent business, a lot of photos with Kenney. And Shane Keating actually sent a cease and desist letter by his lawyer to Chandler over some of the misrepresentation he was giving to Evan Spencer. Evan Spencer was an aide to Shane Keating, and it looks like Evan Spencer will win tonight.
So much to discuss. We will continue that discussion in a few minutes. Dwayne, thanks for now. We want to go, though, live to Adam McVicker, who is standing by at Jyoti Gondek, Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek's campaign headquarters. Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. We're actually waiting right now for the mayor-elect to come and speak. The room is set up for her to come through and give her a victory speech. We do know she heard from Jeremy Farkas earlier. They spoke on the phone briefly before, just after he made his speech here. She is in the building, and the room is being set up. She has supporters behind me here, joining virtually via Zoom for that victory speech. So we are awaiting the mayor-elect to enter the room here and talk about what's next for her as she enters this role as the 37th mayor in the city's history here. So we're awaiting that speech, and we'll carry it to you live once she does arrive in the room here. Back to you.
All right, now we're going to go to Jamie Dahl, who has been with the Jamie Farkas headquarters throughout the evening. And we heard a little while ago from Jeremy Farkas in his concession speech, and seemed to be quite emotional about his run for mayor coming to an end tonight. We are having an audio play. Back to her in just a moment. We heard Dwayne Bratt talking about that and agreeing that it was quite an emotional Jeremy Farkas. You know, we talk about what an incredible task this is, and they were all celebrated.
2, 3, 1, 2.
Oh, now there we go. Okay, Jamie's got the microphone going. Off you go, Jamie. Tell us about how things are there tonight.
Yeah, hi guys. You know, I think it was a very gracious Jeremy Farkas that we saw tonight, and just seconds after that concession speech, he was on the phone congratulating Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek, and he said, you know, these weren't the results anyone was looking for in this room, but they are still results that they can be proud of. And he spent a lot of time working through the room, thanking his supporters and his family, everyone that stood by him on this 13-month campaign, really this journey that he has been on. And he said But really, his message is now is the time that everyone needs to come together. Everybody needs to support this new team, these new faces, and Calgarians really need to rally behind some of the issues that he himself was pushing throughout his term in council, and I asked what his legacy will be, and he talked about how he kind of was the second sober thought, trying to hold some of the city's issues and decisions to account, and he hopes that council will continue on with that. What's next for Jeremy Farkas? He was only 35 years old. I asked him, will your name be on a ballot anytime soon? And he said, never say never. He just wants to maybe get some sleep, clean up those campaign signs, and take a bit of a breather.
Yeah, I can just imagine. Thanks for that, Jamie. I'm sure we will chat with you again coming up in a little bit. You just need a little bit of time to decompress after something like that. So now we want to take you to some of the other areas we're keeping an eye on. The other major city in Calgary, of course, Edmonton, electing a new mayor. Our decision desk has elected Amarjeet Sohi as the next mayor of Edmonton.
Obviously still waiting for some results in that race, with 89% of the polls reporting. In the city of Lethbridge, 53% of the polls reporting, but a very close race between Blaine Hagan and Bridget Mearns, 44% to 40%. So that is a race we will continue to watch through the evening.
And again, in Red Deer, a different story. Only 9% of the polls reporting at this point, but as we know, it can come in pretty quickly. But right now, Ken Johnston is in the lead with 57% to Jeremy Moore's 15%.
Okay, so obviously those are some of the major cities in our province, but here in the Calgary area, the surrounding area, we're keeping a close eye on results there. So let's go over to Lauren Pullen at the big board for some updates.
Joel, we do have results that have been pouring in several areas surrounding Calgary. We did set the stage for Banff not too long ago, and we do have some news from Banff. Town officials have let us know that Corey DeMano is the mayor-elect of Banff. She was a former councillor for 8 years. Again, town council did vote her in to fill Mayor Karen Sorensen's shoes when she moved on to that Senate position. It looks like Banff residents have decided as well that she will be their next mayor. 1,000 votes to Brian Standish's 500 votes. So she's taking a convincing 53% of the vote so far, and 24% going to Brian Standish. So again, she's going to be pushing forward on those tourism decisions, big moves on the economy, trying to get Banff back on track. And another big thing is making positive and development decisions that do really look and reflect the environment. Of course, we know that it is a hotspot for many people to come visit and come see, and really draws a lot of people to the area of the Rocky Mountains. Another big one to report for you tonight is in Olds. The town of Olds has a new mayor-elect as of tonight, but a very familiar face. As you can see, this race was incredibly close, and for very good reason. Michael Musiczka was the incumbent mayor. He was actually acclaimed back in 2017, and that was after former Mayor Judy Dahl ended up dropping out of the race. She'd been the mayor in Olds for 13 years, the longest running mayor that town had seen. But back in 2017, she decided she needed to take a pause from politics. Now, threw her name back in, and those Olds residents have decided by 54% of the vote that she will be their mayor-elect. Joel, Linda?
All right, thanks, Lauren. We understand that Jyoti Gondek will be speaking shortly, so we're going to go to her as soon as she starts talking. Our Adam McVicker is there keeping an eye on things. But before that, we want to take a moment just to do a little zip around and give you some of the numbers. Again, the new mayor of Calgary, mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek, at 45%, with 94% of the polls reporting to Jeremy Farkas's 30% of the vote. Jeff Davison there at 13% and Brad Field 5%.
Yeah, and here are some of the ward results. I was referencing them earlier in our conversation with Dwayne. Just to reset for you, Sonia Sharp elected in Ward 1. Jennifer Wyness in Ward 2 elected with 48% of the vote. And an incumbent councillor going down to defeat there. And councillor in Ward 3, Jasmine Demand, former Olympic wrestler, is in the lead there. And in Ward 4, the incumbent Sean Chu, this one has not been declared yet. You can see it is still close. This is one of our closest races, but we have now called it. Actually, this is new. Raj Dhaliwal in Ward 5. That was George Chahal's ward before he withdrew, obviously. Richard Pootmans elected in Ward 6, former city councillor there.
And in Ward 7, Drew Farrell was in council for 20 years in this ward. Terry Wong right now with 27% support to Heather McRae's 22, with 90% of the polls reporting. And Courtney Walcott declared elected in Ward 8 to the next contender, Gary Bobrovitz, at 23%.
In Ward 9, now we can say Giancarlo Carra is re-elected. 36% of the vote to 35% of the vote, very close there. In Ward 10, Andre Chabot, a former city councillor himself, has been elected with 33% of the vote.
And in Ward 11, this was Jeremy Farkas's vote. We can see that most of the polls are reporting, but it's still very close there. Courtney Brannigan is in the lead next to Rob Ward. And in Ward 12, Evan Spencer has been elected at 39%. He's worked closely with the former city councillor, Shane Keating. And in Ward 13, Diane Colley-Urquhart, the longest-serving councillor, will not be going back to City Hall.
Ward 14, Peter DeMong will be going back to City Hall, re-elected in that ward with a wide margin, 93% of the polls reporting, 66% of the vote so far. So back to that mayoral board, results board, we should say. Jyoti Gondek with 45%. Obviously, councillor, now mayor-elect Gondek, has been on council. She understands the ropes. There will be a number of new faces that will join her from those council races that we just went through. And it will be interesting to see, obviously, and we'll have this discussion as we continue our coverage tonight about how that council may potentially work together, given with how many new names that we have leading our city forward.
Right, and I think Dwayne talked about this a little bit earlier. When you talk about people who put their name forward, some people do it for the experience, for their resume perhaps, for notoriety. But then there's someone like Jeff Davison, who has been on council for the last 4 years, and now what happens with, he's been very involved in the city. He's got a lot on his resume, but it'll be interesting to see, maybe how he's utilized going forward and what his choices are. He was in the energy industry, also started a tech company, so I think this won't be the last that we see of Jeff Davison, for sure.
46,000 people voted for him to be mayor in this city. Obviously, he is third at 13%, but there is still a following there. And we do see 4 names here right now, and if you're listening on the radio, I apologize for constantly referring to television. There are 4 names right now. These are the top 4 finishers as of right now. There's still 6% of the polls left to come in. 27 names, though, were on that ballot.
Yes,
there are a number of other results beyond this.
Yeah, and 4 were women. There is the movement, the Ask Her movement, and that is, encouraging more women to run at the municipal level. And here we see the first female mayor-elect in the city of Calgary.
We're going to run through, just in case you're joining us, and they do go by pretty quickly, so it's not a bad thing to talk about them again. The ward results in our city, because obviously mayor is the big race. It impacts everybody. We all get to vote on it, but it is one seat that makes up an entire council. So again, Sonia Sharp, former civil servant, worked for the city of Calgary. 45% of the vote going to council in Ward 1.
And in Ward 2, Jennifer Wyness, and there you see the incumbent Joe Maglioka with 10% support will not be going back to City Hall. And there's in Ward 3, Jasmine Meehan, former Olympic wrestler. She's also got her master's in psychology and public policy. She will be going to City Hall.
Ward 4 here, this is the race we're still following. Sean Chu, 45% with 90% reporting. DJ Kelly, 40%. So we're still waiting on that one. Raj Dhaliwal, 28% of the vote in a pretty close 3-way race there.
And a former city councillor, Richard Pootmans, who was in council from 2010 to 17, he's going back to City Hall. And in Ward 7, Drew Farrell's former ward, Terry Wong. Again, we haven't called this one yet. It's still quite close there.
This Ward 8 is a ward that was represented by Evan Woolley, will be represented going forward by Courtney Walcott, defeating Gary Bobrovitz, 31% of the vote there. Giancarlo Carra, a very, very close. I want to ask Dwayne about that when we get a chance to talk to him. 1% goes back to City Council.
And again, while you watch the numbers go by here, we are waiting for Jyoti Gondek. We're going to go to her shortly. That you just saw was Ward 10, and Andre Chabot, again, a former councillor, is going back, and he will be in that seat there.
Courtney Brannigan leading right now in Ward 11. Still too close to call. Evan Spencer, former Shane Keating staffer, in Ward 12, defeating Craig Chandler. And Dan McLean, this is one that we did speak with Dwayne about. Diane Colley-Urquhart had been on council for many years, finishing third tonight, will not be going back.
And in Ward 14, this is one of the ones we called early, and I think he did quite well. Peter DeMong, who is the incumbent in Ward 14, was a small business owner for many years before stepping into council.
Okay, so other races we are watching. The City of Lethbridge, we can now say Blaine Higgin has been elected mayor, 43% of the vote there. Bridget Mearns, 41%. Very close race in the City of Lethbridge. Still 6% of the polls reporting, but Global News is making that projection.
And we're going to go to Chestermere now. Our Lauren Pullen has been keeping an eye on some of these for us tonight, so we're just going to bring you up to date on these numbers. Still early, we don't have a lot of polls reporting. Oh no, look at that. It's elected Jeff Colvin. I'm sorry. Okay, now we're going to go to Jyoti Gondek coming into her headquarters.
Well, hello, Calgary. Let's begin by acknowledging that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation, Region 3, and all the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. Thank you, Calgary, with all of my heart. Thank you for engaging in democracy and sending a clear signal about what our future looks like. Thank you for embracing a vision of promise and opportunity. This election is about all of you and the many things that you believe we can accomplish together. It's also about the hard work of so many candidates and their campaign teams who ran because they all believed in our city. This election is about my own campaign team. It's about 1,200 volunteers strong, volunteers who gave their time and energy to a common purpose, to ensuring that we gave people a reason to vote. My heart is full at the thought of how much love and support I have received, not only from the day I announced, but all the way up to today. This election is also about my family. Justice, Todd, and my mom, please know that all of your sacrifices did not go unnoticed. Thank you for taking this journey with me, for caring about me, and believing in me. This election is also about my dad, who left us far too early. It was actually his unfinished community service that I picked up in 2003 that has brought me to this point in my life. My attention to seva, to service, that's all his legacy. And so now we turn to that focus on the mission of service to build a stronger city. I look forward to meetings with my newly elected council colleagues. I look forward to meetings with my fellow mayors in this province. And I look forward to meeting with Premier Kenney's government to set a path forward for our future. I am also optimistic that we will continue to forge strong relationships with our federal government in a manner that opens up opportunity for our city. I'm looking forward to also maintaining many of the relationships that started on this campaign trail. I'd like to hear more from Jan Damery and Zane Novak about their ideas for our social service organizations. I'd like to hear more from Grace Yan and Brad Field about how we can strengthen our business community, and I trust that both Jeff Davison and Jeremy Farkas will stay engaged with our new council to offer their insights and experiences from their time in service. I'm very excited about this prospect of creating a new team, one that prioritizes the well-being of Calgarians through ensuring that we understand our collective strength. Your new council will pull together around a common vision that makes us more resilient as a city. We will set the bar high to deliver on your expectations, and we will remain accountable to all of you. Having listened to you over the last 4 years on council, as well as the last 9 months on the campaign trail, you have asked me to lead with a steady hand as we emerge from economic turmoil and a pandemic. I will ensure that we stay focused on a recovery that is rooted in economic, social, and environmental resiliency. Together with the business community and our creative sector, your City Council will deliver on the vision of a revitalized downtown that brings about spaces and places that are welcoming and alive. We'll work with our economic development partners and real estate experts to ensure that our vacancies become a thing of the past, because we will have evolved our buildings into active hubs at all hours of the day. In partnership with our nonprofit leaders, we will lift up people in positions of vulnerability because we choose to rebuild our city from a place of compassion. We will address harm reduction, poverty, safety, and we will ensure that every Calgarian is able to live in a home with dignity and respect. Our commitments and actions related to reconciliation and anti-racism will further create a city that is welcoming and inclusive. Your new City Council will advance the labor force participation of women by ensuring that we attract capital to Calgary for female entrepreneurs who are rising stars, with ideas that are capturing the attention of global business leaders. We will be steadfast in providing access to safe and affordable opportunities for children's early education and care. And your new City Council will make a commitment to climate action because we can and we must. Our ability to compete on the global stage depends on taking on the position of being a leader in the transitioning economy, committed to creating more sustainable, greener, and cleaner solutions to be used across businesses and industries. The City of Calgary will progress our mission to electrifying our corporate fleets, and we will work with regional partners on flood mitigation and food security. We will accomplish these goals as a council in service of all Calgarians. As your mayor, I will lead with courage, with conviction, and with humility. I will be with you every step of the way as we encounter the unknown and we make our way through unforeseen challenges. You can take comfort in having elected a mayor who is able to rise to any occasion and answer every call. It has been an absolute privilege to run in this election and highlight all of the things that are important to you. It will now be an honor to serve as your mayor. Wow, and support you. And support you into a future that is ours to shape. Thank you, Calgary.
Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek speaking to the citizens of Calgary and saying thank you with a very detailed plan of what she'd like to accomplish.
All right, welcome to our coverage here, Decision Calgary. Jyoti Gondek, we just heard from her, mayor-elect here in the city of Calgary. A number of results to talk about, including that one, the big one. Let's bring in political scientist Dwayne Bratt once again. Dwayne, we just heard from Mayor-elect Gondek. What is your takeaway from her victory speech tonight?
Oh, it's always easier to read a victory speech than it is a defeat speech, and I think Gondek hit the right notes. Expressing thanks to the voters of Calgary for electing her as mayor, thanking her campaign workers, thanking the people that ran against her. As I said, it's much easier to win than it is to lose and have to give a speech. So big smiles on everybody's face in that room.
Yeah, she had some pretty detailed, specific points on what she wants to accomplish. Was she reaching out to some of the supporters of the other candidates to say, these are some of the things I want to do going forward with everyone?
I think more to the new council that's coming in. It's an opportunity of making a first impression with a brand new set of councillors. So, you know, it could be interpreted as reaching out to other candidate supporters and people who didn't vote for her. But I think more importantly, it was sending a message to who are going to be her new colleagues on City Council in what has been a dramatic turnover of people.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that. But first, just sticking with Mayor-elect Gondek, you know, her opponents tried to say this was Mayor Naheed Nenshi the next 2.0, right? In your mind, what will be some of the similarities and then some of the differences between the two?
Well, I think that maybe backfired on those when you saw polls that Nenshi was leaving office with 65% approval rating. I think branding Gondek with Nenshi might not have been a great idea for them. It's notable that Naheed Nenshi never did endorse Jyoti Gondek, although clearly members of his campaign team have been working on the Gondek campaign. And Nenshi stayed out of it. It was clear he didn't want Farkas to win, but he never did fully endorse Jyoti Gondek. And so she won this on her own. And full credit to her. And you know, I think where the similarities lie is, again, it's another sign of the diversity of Calgary. Naheed was the first visible minority to be elected mayor of Calgary. Jyoti Gondek is the second and the first woman, so a woman of color. That, I think, is an important message, that Nenshi wasn't just a one-off there. I think the other is some of the stuff on COVID. Beyond the mayor, Jyoti Gondek was one of the strongest advocates for tougher measures, for masks, for vaccine mandates, for challenging the provincial government. I don't think any of that is going away. We're also dealing with educators. Naheed taught with me at Mount Royal University. Jyoti Gondek is a former sessional instructor, and it's actually Dr. Gondek with a degree in urban sociology. So another intellectual as mayor. Those are an awful lot of similarities.
Dwayne, one of the things I took note of in her victory speech was her reference to, was one of the first things she talked about, was meeting with the Kenney government. So I'm not sure if that's just protocol or if that's going to be one of the priorities, is to have that conversation with the UCP government. Oh,
I think it is. I mean, that is one of the biggest relationships that you're going to have as a big city mayor, is your relationship with the provincial government. I think she also is going to want to meet with Amarjit Sohi, who's the mayor-elect in Edmonton. I think Don Iveson and Naheed Nenshi work very well together. And I would expect that Gondek and Amarjit Sohi are going to work very well together.
I do want to ask you, because you did mention it, that one of the things you're going to be looking at is how Mayor-elect Gondek works with the incoming city councillors, some new, most new I should say, some old faces. Any particular races that you want to touch on, either that have been called or still are close tonight? So I want to focus on Ward 7. Ward 7 remains quite close. With Terry Wong from the Chinatown Business Association, and a strong critic of the Guide to Communities, and Heather McRae, whose husband is Stephen Carter, who ran Gondek's campaign. There was close coordination between the Gondek and McRae campaigns, but it looks like Terry Wong, who is a critic of some of the activity of City Council, is going to be elected. And so what is the role that Terry is going to play on there? The other is in Ward 9, Giancarlo Cara did win again as an incumbent, but it was a very narrow victory over Naomi Withers. Cara has been on council for a number of terms. He is seen as one of the most progressive candidates on council, one of the most left-wing candidates on council, and this was a real shot across the bow to him, where he almost lost. And so typically incumbents do very, very well. We've seen a number of incumbents go down to defeat tonight.
Well, and let's talk about one of the incumbents, and we still haven't called Ward 4 with Sean Chu. It's still very close there tonight.
It is. It remains a very tough race. And although it looks like Sean Chu is going to pull this out, he's now up about 1,000 votes over DJ Kelly. But you know, when the stories broke about Sean Chu's behavior as a police officer, they occurred after the advanced polls. More breaking news occurred today at 5 o'clock after many people had voted. So I don't think Chu could very well win tonight, and he's probably the odds-on favorite of pulling this out. But the bad news doesn't end for him tonight. It may only be beginning.
We have more experts standing by. We want to get to them in a second. But first, Dwayne, before we do that, I just want to ask you, so much had been made about what will be the message from this election. Will it be a change election, right? Jyoti Gondek, obviously, our mayor-elect. We're seeing, as you just pointed out, Giancarlo Carra, for example, squeaking out a re-election victory there. It seems a little bit of a mishmash, kind of some change, some new faces. I guess, what's your take on where we stand now?
I go back to the three themes that I discussed last time. I think it is a change. You've got a dramatic changeover of city council. I think the second is an increase in the number of women on council. It hasn't hit a historic high. We're probably looking at 5 or 6. But at the same time, having a female mayor kind of puts the thumb on the scale of that. And then the third is I think a message was sent to the Kenney government, as the federal election did a month prior. Those are the three big takeaways for me tonight.
All right, thanks, Dwayne. I think we're going to go back to Dallas now and our panel for some more insight on what we're seeing. Dallas?
Thank you, Linda and Joel. I think we're going to get to some of the results of those extra questions on the ballot now. If we can pull those up, what we're going to see and one of the ballots for the city of Calgary was that fluoride question. Right now, we know that 61% voted yes to put that back into the drinking water. 39% voted no. Let's bring in our panelists now for some insight on that as we wait for some of the other ballot questions and numbers there. Fluoride, yes, 61, no, 39. Any surprises there for you, Ted?
No. Just based on like anecdotal evidence with respect to the number of signs that I've seen around. It's a little bit closer than I thought, but you know what? I'm not surprised that it's on the yes side of things, but this is a non-binding vote too, right? We'll have to see what the incoming city council does decide to do, like the council did, about 10-ish years ago, when even though the last time we had a plebiscite on this, it was to put fluoride in the water, and then of course the council back then, in a close vote, voted to take it out.
Let's talk about the daylight saving time. We're seeing the yes vote. Do you want Alberta to adopt year-round daylight saving time? Yes, 49%. No, 51%. This is a tight one, Lisa. What do you make of that?
Well, this was a really tricky question in a variety of ways, because I think that the option that a lot of people wanted wasn't on the ballot. And so you were forced to choose between something that would, I think in a lot of people's views, would be really undesirable. It would mean it would be dark for a long time in the mornings. Whereas the option that people would prefer wasn't on the ballot. So, what we saw there was really narrow. I wonder, though, this is what Calgary says isn't the whole picture. We need to know what the vote was in the rest of the province. And I think as you get further north, this matters more and more because the days are even shorter. So early days still to know whether there's going to be any action on that one.
Yeah, fair enough. Very important to note that these are the results for the city of Calgary right now. 49% yes to sticking with daylight saving time. Let's talk about that equalization question. Should equalization payments be removed for the Constitution? 59% said yes, 41% said no in the city of Calgary alone. Of course, this is a provincial question. Jason, what do you make of those results?
I think this is on par with where we were tracking in some of the polls that were done before, a little bit higher slightly. But again, without the context of the rest of the province, what does it actually mean? But I got to say, it's surprising, not only because that program is really, really misunderstood, but also the question was framed in such a bizarre way. And lastly, because it did not pan out the way that I thought it did in 2019. I thought we would have councillors or council candidates openly campaigning on the question of equalization, whether they were for or against. I expected a very strong Jason Kenney and UCP government to go out and do their bidding. And even without those things, you're seeing strong support. So definitely something to monitor where Calgary sits in comparison to the rest of the province.
Jason, I just want to go back to what we just saw out of Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek and her speech there, her victory speech, I suppose. What did you make of it?
I thought it was the speech she wanted to give. It was very similar to her closing arguments in many of the debates. It extended an olive branch to past and future collaborators, and it also, I think, outlined the issues that she wanted to tackle in a very sort of wonkish and kind of technocratic way. I think what was missing, I think for me, was how we all fit into that. The story of us, the story of how our city has evolved from that place called Mohkinstsis amidst rolling hills and high bluffs and floodplains to a saloon city with dirt trails and railways, now to a city that is, adhered to a standing credo etched into our coat of arms, ONWARD, onward, constantly reinventing itself and thinking about what it can be. The sweet spot between those two things is ultimately where I think we are as Calgarians. You didn't hear some of that oratory or storytelling ability. It was very matter of fact, very direct, I think very similar to her style. But that's what I garnered as what was present and maybe what was missing from that speech tonight.
Yeah, fair enough. We were talking about how she is a scholar, a doctor, Jyoti Gondek. You are Dr. Lisa Young as well. Lisa, I did notice Dwayne was talking about the similarities that everyone's been making between Gondek and former Mayor Nenshi there, still current mayor for a little while, I suppose. What I did notice is that her messaging saying mission of service was the very same words that Mayor Nenshi has been using all along as well. She's committed to service. She says you can take comfort in knowing that you've elected a mayor that will answer the call. Is this a promise that can be kept? I mean, there are so many issues here. Can she be something for everybody? That will be a big question, I think.
Well, obviously, there are going to be challenges, but I don't think that takes anything away from that message of to be of service. And I think, that really was the vision that she was offering, right? And it's not a, it's not necessarily those kinds of, self-driven kind of messaging, but rather talking about, why she's doing this, right? And why she's willing to, spend years of her life being of service to the people of Calgary. So I think that's an important message. Now, when we think about the challenges that face her, I think it was very important. She talked about how she was going to work with the provincial government. She mentioned the premier. But I think one of the big challenges she's going to face in order to be effective in the role is going to be to find a way to work constructively with the provincial government. Her campaign was run in part on criticism of the provincial government, and particularly its handling of the COVID crisis. And now she needs to move beyond that and find a way to engage constructively with Premier Kenney.
Yeah, Ted, her campaign, especially around the property tax question, she said she wanted to ask for a fair deal from the province, much like the province is asking for a fair deal from Canada when it comes to just how much money we are sending up to Edmonton in the legislature from our property taxes in the city. One of the things she's going to have to do is work with this UCP government. She said she's willing to do that. She's also promised work on the environment, anti-racism, women in entrepreneur roles, and food security as well, not to mention the transition of energy and a focus on the environment to be vital to this world stage. What do you think we're going to see first from Jyoti Gondek as
first? Yeah, that's a very good question. For sure, she's going to reach out to the premier and try and set up a meeting and then kind of, discuss things obviously with that. But first, issue-wise, I think it may be COVID related and the whole recovery and connecting that with the residential, non-residential tax issue and kind of that area. I mean, that's kind of a given, considering that we're still in where we are in the COVID pandemic. Beyond that, though, it'll be interesting to see what she decides to tackle first. I'm guessing it'll be the taxation issue. I really do. But as we heard in her speech, and she said in some of the mayoral debates during this campaign, that the entrepreneurial kind of groundswell in the province, especially when it comes to female entrepreneurs. Jyoti Gondek has touched on that many times. I remember from the debate that, Dallas, you were kind of co-moderating with Deb Yedlin from the Chamber. She talked about fueling a feminist economy. And so that may be something that she decides to tackle first. Excuse me. We'll have to see, though. It'll be really interesting to see what comes down.
Oh, we only have 45 seconds. Maybe this is a topic for the next 10 minutes. But what are we going to see with our property taxes, residential and business, now that Jyoti Gondek has been elected as mayor of Calgary? Any thoughts? They have a budget ahead of them to set for the next 4 years, Jason?
Yeah, that mid-cycle budget adjustment is going to come fast and furious amidst a lot of other sort of upskilling for a brand new council in terms of orientation and training, and then also citizen committees and board appointments that they have to make. There's a lot of rote stuff that is going to get in the way of, immediately dealing with 1 or 2 or 3 issues. There's some symbolic things around triggering a declaration of a climate crisis that could be done fairly quickly, but there's some nitty-gritty work that really needs to be done. And for the values that she's proposed, it'll be interesting to see the alignment up and down the council ticket around the environment and a feminist economy. And if these are the values that not only Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek has, but also some of her fellow council colleagues, a majority, well, your values should be reflected in your budget. And these mid-cycle budget adjustments is where those values could be on display in the coming weeks and months.
We'll see what comes out of that. Just want to pass along some reaction. We are seeing Jeff Davison has posted a picture with himself and Jyoti Gondek, of course, both serving on council together. It reads, "Thank you, Calgary. The last 4 years have taught me a lot about Calgary and even more about myself. It has been an honor to serve Ward 6, and I commit to fully supporting our new mayor." We have heard from Mayor Naheed Nenshi as well. All he writes is history made. Congratulations, Jyoti Gondek, to you and your team. And Linda and Joel, unfortunately, the Ducks won it in overtime, 3-2 final.
Oh.
Home opener, so the excitement is all over the place. Thumbs down for the Ducks, but I think they were having a lot of excitement down at the Dome, just as we are in the studio.
Of course. I think we're having more fun. Thanks, Dallas.
Thanks.
Hey, let's look at some other races across our province. In Edmonton, Global News projecting Amarjeet Sohi elected mayor there. Former federal Liberal cabinet minister will be joining Jyoti Gondek as the big city mayors in the days ahead. When we look at the city of Lethbridge, Global News projecting Dwayne Higgin winning the mayor's chair narrowly there. 43 to 41%.
Yeah, we're starting to see some more numbers come in Red Deer, and the incumbent Taraveer is not running again this year, so Ken Johnston at the moment, who has served 2 terms on council, has 56% support in Red Deer. We're going to go now to Lauren Pullen for more on some of the areas outside Calgary. What are you seeing?
Again, the results. Former Mayor John Borman deciding not to throw his hat back in the race.
I believe we have a little audio issue.
Oh, your microphone.
It's the joys of live online TV.
Okay, come back to us for a sec, because she has her microphone strategically located, so she has to turn it back on.
Yeah, we'll get Lauren's, we'll get her voice back here in a second. But that's one of the things that we are doing obviously tonight, because a lot of change here on Calgary Council. We have a new mayor here in Calgary, and we're going to have new mayors in the other major cities across our province too: Edmonton, Lethbridge, and Red Deer. The outlying areas we're also watching tonight.
Yeah, and in Banff, Lauren, I think you're all hooked up again. In Banff, Court DeMano has been re-elected out there.
We have to keep the batteries recharged here. It's a very long show here, so I don't want to leave it on and
there we go.
Go dead. So again, I'm going to take you to Canmore here. The seat left open after longtime Mayor John Borman decided not to Run again. Sean Krausert, the mayor-elect for Canmore, pretty handedly taking 66% of the vote. He was not on the last town council, however, was a town councillor the term before that. But he is taking out Vi Sanford, who was on town council for 9 years there. So some transition, some change happening in Canmore. Joel, Linda.
Okay, thank you so much, Lauren. Okay, so a lot still to talk about, still to discuss. There are still some races outstanding here in Calgary on council with results just too close to call right now.
Yeah, so we're going to keep an eye. One of those is 4 and 7, so we're still keeping an eye on some of those. And of course, a couple of familiar faces not going back to City Hall: Joe Maglioka, Diane Colley-Urquhart, Giancarlo Carra is going back, and so is Peter DeMong. So we will keep updating you with the numbers.
History has been made in our city. Calgary has elected its first female mayor.
Jyoti Gondek has won handily in what has been billed by pollsters as a 2-horse race against mayoral candidate and former city councillor Jeremy Farkas. Mayor-elect Gondek quickly jumped out to an early lead as soon as poll stations started reporting numbers at around 8:30 this evening, and then the gap only widened in her favor tonight. Right now, the ballot count shows Gondek winning the mayoral race with nearly 45% of the vote. A small celebration was held at Jyoti Gondek's campaign headquarters just over half an hour ago as the mayor-elect spoke, thanking Calgarians for her historic victory.
Yeah, the mayor-elect was also gracious to those who ran against her, inviting other candidates to engage with her on the future to input how best to serve Calgarians moving forward. Gondek also says she is humbled by all the work done by her campaign team leading up to the election, giving credit to her over 1,200 volunteer team members that she has worked with over the campaign.
And prior to Jyoti Gondek and her victory speech, we did hear from Jeremy Farkas as well in his concession speech. He was emotional, he was gracious, and said he wished her well and encouraged everyone to work together. So it'll be interesting to see what he will do in the future. But of course, stay with us live tonight. We're on YouTube, Amazon Prime, the Global TV app, and globalnews.ca/Calgary. Also on 770 CHQR. Then coming up at 11 o'clock tonight, I hope you can join us for a recap of how the night unfolded.
Our coverage continues of Decision Calgary 2021. So much to cover. Some results we're still waiting for. Let's go back to our expert panel with Dallas Flexhawk.
Yeah, thanks for that, Linda and Joel. We were talking last time about the budget adjustments that are going to have to be made. So let's bring in our panel to continue that conversation. Lisa, I'll start with you. What are you expecting out of the new mayor and council as they do go through these big, hefty conversations now?
Well, I think, we'll have to wait and see in a lot of ways. We need to give this council a chance to meet, to figure out how they're going to work together, and then to start tackling these issues. And there are no easy solutions to this, right? We know that Calgary has some structural issues about its tax system. And, certainly we've got a lot of talent around the table. We've got, a mayor who is well qualified and experienced. We've got some new ideas that are at the table, but we're really going to have to wait and see how they're going to go about tackling this.
Are new ideas going to be enough, Lisa, to make this shift that this city needs and has needed for quite some time, especially around those property tax issues, especially around the empty downtown core? All of this ends up working together in our city.
Yeah, I mean, certainly new ideas I think will help. A fresh council, a council that can resolve to find ways to work together to address these fundamental issues. Beyond that, I think, this is going to be a multi-level effort as well. We're going to need to see cooperation across all 3 levels of government. We're going to need the city to be working with the province and with the federal government, which can play a role in various ways in helping Calgary deal with this complex set of problems that reinforce each other.
Yeah, let's not forget we just had a federal election on September 20th, right? It seems like forever ago now. So let's talk about the issue of trust. Jason, you have been focused on this issue, saying that Calgarians hadn't really trusted City Council. Does this change? Of course, we're still waiting for some of the final results to come in. Does this change sort of rip the Band-Aid off, start fresh, or is there going to have to be some work, real legwork done to gain the trust back of Calgarians?
Yeah, I think 100%. You know, changing the players around the horseshoe is incredibly effective because it represents the will of the people. You know, I was watching some of the B-roll we were rolling earlier, and you had average everyday voters in line, and they're asking, why are you still in line? The temperature is dropping. It's a long wait, and they said because it's our only way that we can have a voice. And Calgarians' voice has been heard tonight with the amount of change that we're seeing. The active work on getting a lot of these very complex issues addressed is what's going to take some time. This is, in City Council, if you put your name forward to serve in any seat as a councillor or as the mayor, you do know that much of your legacy is going to be, sort of experienced or even realized, or maybe not, after you've left office. So, filling up the downtown core, somehow the city's role in the energy transition, fleshing that out, property tax, which will require a huge amount of collaboration with the provincial government, and opening up of debates around the city charter and the Municipal Government Act that have gone nowhere for a long period of time, particularly the charter that was ripped up by the UCP. These are heady issues that are not going to be solved on day 1, day 5, day 100, or day even 1,000. So this is what's going to have to be managed with the trust that Calgarians need right now. And I think that's open communication, honest and ethical behavior, and solving some of the clown car-ish dysfunction that we were seeing in the community with a new council. I think they're off on a right foot tonight.
What do you mean by clown car-ish dysfunction?
Oh, listen, we are talking about, not only expense scandals and revelations about deplorable conduct on behalf of potentially a returning councillor and one that is exiting, but we're also talking about, integrity complaints from the integrity commissioner. We're also talking about systemic overhauls over many years. This 2017 council, many of them were there in previous cycles as well. We've heard reports about, untoward behavior happening in council's office, which has led to a systemic overhaul of how council conduct is managed, reporting and whistleblowing in terms of council office behavior, and then all of the grandstanding that we've seen in the media over a number of cycles that have given birth to some of the candidates and challengers that we've seen this evening. The ability to just put your shoulder to the wheel, get the work done, not be jockeying for position or exploiting mistruths or poor ethics is exactly what I think we demand from this new city council. So that's going to be very, very difficult. For example, if Ward 4 incumbent councillor Sean Chu is reelected tonight, I fully expect that there will be people lining up outside of City Hall calling for his immediate resignation.
We're certainly going to be following that situation as it unfolds, as we get more claims verified with that, and hearing from Calgary Police on some of that as well. We're going to leave it there for now. Still lots more to talk about, yes, but the main thing, we have a new mayor, and we're going to have a lot of new faces on City Council this time around. Linda and Joel.
Thanks, Dallas. And Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek is standing by with our Adam McVicker now. We want to get right to them. Adam.
Yes, thank you very much, Linda. I'm standing here with Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek. Congratulations on your victory tonight, Mayor-elect. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling incredibly humbled by the overwhelming support. Just very happy to be serving in this position.
You were the first woman elected mayor in Calgary's history. How significant is that to you, and has it sunk in just yet?
I think it's going to continue to sink in, but I'm very happy that we have normalized this concept of women and people of color being in leadership positions.
And so now moving forward, you will be chairing a new council of very few incumbent faces on council, very few familiar faces. How big of a challenge is that going to be, and what's your hope for that process?
I'm incredibly optimistic about creating this new team. I have met with a lot of the candidates during the campaign, and I think we're bringing some really amazing people into council who have not only great ideas but great experiences within their communities, within their business experience. So I just think we have a tremendous opportunity to play on our strengths which will be diverse.
We just listened to your speech, focused a lot on a resilient city, social resiliency, economic resiliency, as well as environmental resiliency. What's going to be the biggest challenge moving forward in trying to get this policy agenda passed through council?
I think the biggest challenge is the way we approach decision making. If we are able to look at our decisions through that lens of resilience, then we will make great decisions. If we continue to get in the weeds the way we have in the past, we will not be making strategic decisions. And that will be the thing that we need to do right up front, set that tone that we are a strategic body.
Throughout this campaign, it's been a pretty tight race between yourself and, of course, your former council colleague, Jeremy Farkas. Were you expecting tonight's result to be as it was? And it felt like it was a bit called earlier than we anticipated it would be this evening.
It got called a lot earlier than I anticipated, that's for sure. Everyone hopes that you will have a tremendous result and that it will be quick. But that's sort of, the best case scenario. We were prepared to be here as long as we needed to be. I'm very happy that it was a clear decision from Calgarians, and I'm honored to be representing them.
Yeah, what's your message to Calgarians who will be waking up tomorrow to a mayor that is not named Naheed Nenshi?
I think we need to remember how much tremendous work Mayor Nenshi has done, and I think Calgarians can rest easy that I'm up to the challenge of what this very unpredictable environment brings us.
And so I guess what can Calgarians expect from you sitting in the mayor's chair for over the next 4 years?
I'm very interested in creating a collaborative environment where we are working with different orders of government, different sectors, and all of us together as a council, understanding what it is that we bring forward that can advance a lot of the projects that we have in place and how we can make our corporation stronger.
I just got a couple more for you, Mayor. Now, one question over the campaign, of course, in August, rallying against the provincial government and their COVID-19 response. You will now, the Mayor of Calgary, will have to work with the provincial government on certain things. How will you be approaching that after being a vocal opponent of them?
The point is that I was an advocate for Calgarians, and I was an advocate for making sure that our business community had some sort of certainty and predictability. That's why we were asking for vaccine passports. That's why we wanted to provide the sort of environment by which people knew how they could welcome folks into their organizations and know that they were safe. So I think advocating for what Calgarians need shouldn't be viewed as antagonistic. It is simply advocacy.
And so you're heading into the mayor's role now, and if you had one choice for what you would like to get done first in terms of this this platform you have put forward, is there anything that comes to mind right away?
I think it would be important for us to declare a climate emergency as quickly as we can. I think that will certainly draw some attention to our city. It will attract some capital that's available to us, and it allows us to collaborate with other cities and other orders of government that are interested in doing some good work and funding that good work.
And my last one here again for you, sorry. I got plenty for you actually this evening, but what's the message you have to your council colleagues that will be joining you, some for the first time as you were in 2017?
I am very much looking forward to building a team that is diverse, that has a lot of different skill sets, and I'm interested in seeing how we all play a role in our success. And I'm also really interested in making sure that people get recognized for the work that they're doing on council.
Wonderful. Mayor-elect Gondek, congratulations.
Thank you.
And looking forward to seeing what's going to be coming at City Hall over the next 4 years. So, guys, we'll send it back to you in studio.
Adam McVicker, live. Thank you so much. 27 ran, one, obviously one. Jyoti Gondek, another competitor in the race, Jeremy Farkas. Jamie Dahl was at the Farkas HQ all night. Jamie, a much different scene, obviously, there.
Yes, it definitely was, Joel. I don't think it was the night that anyone here in this room had hoped for. The crowd really thinning out, just a few people remaining, including Jeremy Farkas. He really took the time tonight to thank his supporters and everyone that stood by him throughout this campaign. He said he has no regrets, and he's really confident that they went as hard as they possibly could, that they left everything on the table, and they really ran the best ground game that they possibly could. But he said now is the time to unite behind this new council and this new mayor-elect.
We gave 110%. We had incredible volunteers, a credible donor base, grassroots support. It wasn't enough for us to be able to get us across the line, but there's always next time. You never know. You can't keep a closed door to stuff like that, but at the end of the day, you have to celebrate the fact that we've had an election, and we have to wish this new council well in their leadership.
And Jeremy Farkas' family was here tonight. He was embraced by them, tears in his parents' eyes, and they said that they're just so proud of him. He grew up in the community of Dover in Calgary. His father was a refugee to Canada as a young boy, and Farkas said, his parents just really instilled in him that as a Canadian, his ambitions had no bounds. And as he said just there, it sounds like his future definitely is not over in politics. As for what went wrong in this campaign, what went wrong tonight, he says he'll leave it to the pundits to talk about that. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Jamie Dahl. Jamie reporting tonight, and we're hearing from the two people who ended up, as they said, were in a horse race, and we've been following this for a while, and the polling suggested it was those two. So we heard from Jyoti Gondek and Jeremy Farkas, and now we want to bring in Dwayne Bratt to talk more about some of the wards and the results, because we have a few more final numbers that we're looking at. So we'll bring those up as we have a conversation with you. In Ward 7, we were talking about this. Terry Wong, you said very influential in Chinatown. He has been elected in Drew Farrell's former ward. Dwayne.
Yeah, and I mean, Drew Farrell had been there a very long time. Heather McRae had been Drew Farrell's campaign manager back in 2017, so it was an opportunity for some continuation. But now we're getting a reversal. And so once again, another new face showing up on City Council.
In Ward 4, I believe, we are still not calling this one. 93% of the polls reporting Sean Chu, the incumbent there, against DJ Kelly, who a lot of people, at least when you read social media, people pretty high on that candidate.
Yeah, they were. I mean, he has been active in the municipal scene. He worked on Nenshi's campaigns. And I really think he probably could have won this if the stories of Sean Chu had come out before the advanced polls. We're already seeing Jyoti Gondek coming out, very critical tonight after her election victory of Sean Chu. Michelle Rempel has put out a statement. She had previously door-knocked with Sean Chu. She is now greatly distancing from him. So Chu may have won the war tonight, or won the battle tonight, but he's still in for another war starting tomorrow.
The other one that we've been keeping an eye on, and I'm not sure if we've called that yet, is Raj Dhaliwal in Ward 5. Well, first we're going to go to Ward 11. This is Courtney Brannigan there with 97% of the polls reporting, but still it's pretty close for Ward 11.
It is, and this was, again, an open seat, and the potential of another woman councillor sitting on there, currently leading with only a few polls left.
I want to go back to the mayor's race one last time before we let you go in this segment. I asked you earlier the differences and the similarities between Jyoti Gondek and Mayor Naheed Nenshi. We got some similarities, but I'm curious, what's one difference, do you think, between the two, former mayor, I guess, and the mayor-elect?
I think it's going to... Nenshi had a lot of charisma to him. He always believed that he was the smartest man in the room, and he would tell you so. And I think Nenshi did a really good job of representing Calgary on the stage. It was a real eye-opener for those who have big stereotypes of Calgary. The fact that he was the front runner, the path setter, is going to make life a lot easier for Gondek. Where Nenshi had difficulty was winning a lot of votes on council. And so while he was good at representing the city, he wasn't so good at winning votes on council. Let's see if Jyoti Gondek can work better with a brand new council than at times Naheed Nenshi did, because there was some friction that he had with councillors.
Thanks, Dwayne. We want to go to some of the areas around Calgary again. In Edmonton, a new mayor, Amarjit Sohi, a former member of the Liberal Party, a cabinet minister. He has been elected mayor-elect in Edmonton.
Yeah, Don Iveson not running for re-election in the city of Edmonton. A couple of other cities were following a close race in the city of Lethbridge. Blaine Hagan pulling out that victory. Global News projecting he will be the next mayor of Lethbridge, which will be a new mayor. Only 2 points separating him first and second place.
And in Red Deer, Ken Johnston is still in the lead with 55% and 57% of the polls reporting. Again, no incumbent running in Red Deer. We're going to go back to Lauren Pullen for more on some of the outlying areas. Lauren?
Linda, we are still awaiting results from Strathmore and from High River, but we'll take you to Okotoks first, where sadly this mayoral chair was left open after longtime Mayor Bill Robertson passed away after his battle with cancer in July. Former councillor, longtime councillor Tanya Thorne taking this one by 59% of the vote. She has prided herself throughout her time on council in pushing those boundaries, making those hard decisions, and making big decisions on infrastructure and on big things like COVID-19. So 59.2% of the vote going to Tanya Thorne, the mayor-elect there as well. And we want to take you to Chestermere. You did mention earlier that Jeff Colvin had taken over that mayoral seat. It was left open after incumbent Mayor Marshall Chalmers decided not to run again. A bit of a different take on this one. The longtime councillor, or the one-term councillor rather, is Michelle Young. She's the one with that council background and experience. But it's Jeff Colvin taking it by 62% of the vote, and he really touted himself as having practical solutions, real answers, and pushing Chestermere forward. So again, 2,927 voters in Chestermere have put their faith behind him to get those decisions and those things moving. He is the elect for the Chestermere area. And we do want to take note that in Cochrane, Mayor Jeff Janong was acclaimed. He did run uncontested in this race, was the mayor back in 2017, but is acclaimed as mayor of Cochrane. And again, still waiting on some numbers to be coming in. We expect them to be trickling in throughout the night. Okotoks declaring a little bit later because they did say they had such a high voter turnout. So a lot still on the go here, Joel and Linda, and we are seeing those things trickling in. But again, Banff, Canmore, Chestermere, Cochrane, Okotoks, Olds, all of those mayor-elects have been declared now. And again, a lot of transition and a lot of change happening in the outlying areas throughout Calgary.
And if you are from that outlying area, continue to stay with us. If your result has not been said yet, we will get to it once it comes in. For now, though, let's go back to Dallas Flexog with our panel of experts standing by.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joel and Linda. I want to go back to Jyoti Gondek. She was just talking to our Adam McVicker just a moment ago as we do bring in our panel tonight. She told Adam that hopefully this means that what she ran on was being an advocate for Calgarians. Ted, do you think that came through for voters tonight?
I think it did. I really do. I think it did, and I think that's why she did so well in the final numbers. It's also interesting, Dallas, that we've been talking about what we thought her first, kind of move would be as mayor of the city of Calgary, and she decided to highlight that declaring a climate emergency will be her first kind of step as mayor of the city of Calgary, or at least pushing council to do that, to get access to money, to that type of thing. But that's interesting that that wasn't even on my radar, to be honest with you, that was going to be one of her first moves in office as mayor. Maybe this is sending a signal for the first year of her term in office. We'll have to wait and see.
What do you make, Lisa, of that announcement that she said one of her first orders of business was going to be declaring a climate emergency?
Well, it struck me as well. And like Ted, it was not on my radar screen that this was going to be one of the first things that she was going to try to get council to tackle. It's an interesting challenge for council to look at this. I think that there will be great diversity of opinion, some really enthusiastic support for the idea, but also, there are certainly some councillors who've been elected who will want nothing of this. It's also an interesting move. We keep coming back to the question of the relationship with the provincial government. And although Edmonton has declared a climate emergency, and things continue, to make that one of your first issues when you're working with a provincial government that, has put together the energy center and so on, it does suggest that, there's going to be a tense and sometimes rocky relationship, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to work. But I think we're going to see some really interesting and potentially conflictual politics out of this.
Very interesting for sure. Jason, what do you make of that claim of declaring a climate emergency? Is there some concrete actions that can come out of that declaration?
Well, first, it's a depressing statement for me because I pay attention to this way too closely, clearly, because I knew that was the first thing that she was going to declare. So maybe I need to take 3 steps back. Look, it's an interesting one, particularly with what mechanism the city of Calgary is going to use. Is this done sort of by fiat at the mayoral level as a proclamation? Is this going to be something with teeth that's brought by city administration for council to review and then vote and approve? But I also think, as Lisa astutely pointed out, the fractured relationship with the provincial government, to quote a little Jay-Z, she ain't looking at them, she's looking past them. And I think it's looking to the feds. And when it comes to recladding, retrofitting some of these buildings downtown, when it comes to enabling particular green and sustainable building and construction, when it comes to, I think as well, providing access to capital and funding, both government and venture, for a lot of our very leading clean tech companies the world over, this might be a strong signal that doesn't necessarily require immediate collaboration with the provincial government. It would be nice, but I think it's where the real dollars are is going to be from the feds and potentially with the international notice it garners. And I think that is where Edmonton has been far more future oriented than Calgary. Obviously, it's a different environment with Calgary being the energy capital of Canada. Navigating those political tensions and policy tensions will certainly be interesting to watch.
Lisa, I was going to say, who is that declaration going to be for? Is it for our city? Is it for this energy industry, signaling that this energy shift is happening and there's no stopping it? Is it for the tech industries finding its way in? Is it for the international community so they can look at Calgary as a place to do business and in line with some of the other bigger centers in the world that we have seen? Who is this message for?
Well, I think, there's a number of dimensions to this. First of all, I think it's trying to send a signal about the city of Calgary. And again, going a little bit against the narrative and acknowledging that, a lot of international financial decisions are made really with climate front and center. So I think that's part of the audience. I think there's also an internal audience. We talked earlier in the night about the demographics of support for the Gondek campaign, and younger voters were more likely to be supporting Gondek. And we know that this is an issue that younger voters in particular take very seriously and want to see city leadership and other levels of government take action on. So I think this is both addressing an internal constituency, but also sending a signal outwardly.
Talking about those younger voters, certainly young people sticking in this city, wanting to live and work here has been an issue that's come up in this election campaign. But I can't help think, Ted, that this is also a signal perhaps to the provincial government. We're seeing equalization on the ballot, which, by the way, is 58% yes to be removed from the Constitution, 42% is a no for the city of Calgary results. Again, we have to wait for the Alberta ones. But again, is this going to be tough for the UCP government to work with Mayor-elect Jyoti Gondek? And I just want to be a fly on the wall at those first couple of meetings.
No kidding, right? No kidding. Or be flies on the wall after the meeting when they're having honest conversations with their staff, right, as to what happened during that meeting. Yeah, that would be kind of juicy to kind of listen in on, that's for sure. Yeah, I think it is a comment to the UCP government. I agree with Jason and Lisa that it's also a comment toward Ottawa. It's also a comment toward the investment community, and perhaps it's also a comment by declaring a climate emergency to the greening of the energy economy, right? I mean, this is the heart of the energy industry in our country. And if you all of a sudden have the city that's home to, I don't even know how many energy company head offices, then by declaring a climate emergency, you are going to get the eyeballs of the world and say, oh, maybe Calgary is kind of turning a corner. Maybe the energy industry is starting to morph into something a bit greener and something that we can decide to invest in. So it'll be really curious to see what comes of that move, if that is what she does get City Council to do as their first step. And it will be interesting to see what transpires from the conversations that you and I are not privy to, because we're not flies on a wall.
Yeah, important to note there, and important to note for the energy industry too, is that they are working hard to work towards green energy as well. Want to give them props there. We're going to leave it there. We're going to throw it back to Linda and Joel.
All right, thanks, Dallas. And again, lots of insight, and we're going to take another look at the actual numbers that we have seen tonight for Calgary's mayor. Jyoti Gondek, 45% of the vote. She will be going to City Hall as our new mayor. Jeremy Farkas, 30%. Jeff Davison sitting at 13%, and Brad Field at 5%. So an interesting council shaping up, lots of change, including in the very top spot.
98% of the polls reporting still more vote to come in, but those are your top 4 in the race for Calgary Mayor.